My coworker keeps calling me misogynistic for no reason whatsoever and refuses to apologize for spreading nasty rumors about me. So I work for a nonprofit, and when I started as leader of one of the program areas, the program had essentially collapsed after a leadership change and there was only one employee in the whole program. She was a new hire who started 3 months prior to my hiring, who acts as half admin to my team and half admin to the front desk. The new hire is not trained in the program area and is only there to provide clerical support. Her job is to stay at the front of the office as an overall administrative assistant, and when not occupied with that, she's meant to do clerical work for my team. I pay half her salary from my team budget. From the very first day, she has been extremely challenging to work with. As there had been no one on the team, there was no one to set boundaries with her, so she thought of herself as the lead of the team. The team, which was just herself. Once I started, she was immediately upset when I took work away. I recognized that and said I did indeed take work, as this is a team and we need to share responsibilities. She also struggles to multitask, so a lot of things need to be done. She asked me to give her task lists each week and I've done that, but she always finds a way to make a simple task. Literally print signs was one task, a bigger problem. I answer her questions quickly and with logic. For example, she changed the font on the printed signs that I asked for, so I asked her to reprint them with a new font, but she refused to do so, telling me that the only reason I'm asking her to do it again is because I am a man who looks down on her as she is a woman in power. The hamster in my head was running on the wheel non-stop when she said that. Anyway, this is where I know IFCK up. I am very direct and will answer her questions without compliments, etc. I am not going to thank her for making a task more complicated than it needs to be. I will just ask for what I need, say thanks when it's done, and that's her job and my job. She often pouts or sulks when I ask her not to do something. I always make sure to explain that it's outside the scope of work and that it's not a bad idea, just not something we can pursue. But she seems to take it personally and often refers to me as misogynistic. I've been spending my time trying to figure out what worked for the program, what didn't, and what happened to cause the collapse of it originally. In the meantime, I've struggled to manage the employee as I'm not her direct supervisor, and when I tell her something, she goes to strictly other female employees to ask to double check that I'm right, even if they are not her supervisor either. For context, I have experience and knowledge and a master's degree in this programming area. She will waste 3 other people's time only to get the same answers. I have also overheard her 3 times gossiping about me, mainly that she thinks I don't know anything and that I make choices too quickly, and also claiming that I probably hate women. During one of these times, I actually overheard her claiming that she is proof that I laid hands on my ex-wife as well as my children and that is why I can never see them. I have never had a wife, much less a kid. I'm in a happy and committed relationship. Thankfully though, the people she's gossiping and complaining to are all just sounding boards, not really responding, which definitely helps as rumors like these could cost me everything. I've been speaking with my director about how to manage her. I've been begging for help and professional development. Frankly, managing her takes up far more time than I find worth it, and I've gotten to the point where I would like her removed from clerical work for my team. I have a new hire starting soon and I need to address the behavior so it doesn't create a bad team dynamic. Director recommended norming to create better boundaries within each role, so I tried that, but it turned into a major mess. She said she didn't feel heard. I apologized to her, genuinely, as I know my sense of urgency can make some people feel steamrolled sometimes, but I also told her that I feel like I can't trust her due to the gossip and the distrust she has had a part in creating. I asked that we apologize to each other, to which she refused and once again called me misogynistic, so I had to get the director to come in to mediate as I could not continue the meeting. I told the director that I can't move forward until we acknowledge the harmful behavior we've both contributed to. The director, a trained mediator, spent 20 minutes laying groundwork and I apologized, recognized the behavior that harmed her, promised forbearance, and assured that I'm genuinely trying to work on things. And she refused to acknowledge that she contributed negatively at all. The director ended the meeting because we weren't going to get anywhere, and now we have to go to mediation with HR tomorrow morning to create a working agreement. I've not said anything about the rumors yet and I'm wondering if I should address them or not. My wife hates me because I spent too much money on our kids. I am the breadwinner for our family and my wife stays at home. She is a few years older than me and I have always struggled with feeling like I report to her. She denies it strongly, but I still feel that there is a power imbalance that she benefits from. We've done well over the years and have a net worth of $2 million. I have a great job and we make $300,000 a year. My wife is very frugal and not only doesn't like spending money herself, but shames or pressures me when I do. She grew up in a poor family and spending doesn't come easy for her. We were heading to a large local mall with all of our kids to do school shopping when the topic of a budget came up. She was insisting that the budget for each kid should be $100. I suggested that we should be more flexible and get what the kids need and what the kids might want or be excited by. Why am I working as hard as I do if I can't spend the money on my kids from time to time? We do not spoil our kids and back to school is pretty much the only time we get new stuff for our kids. She then changed tactics and claimed that it was her that does laundry and the kids already have enough clothes, so I would have to do the additional laundry that would inevitably come with more clothes. I dug in and said that since I am the breadwinner, and make all of the money, I should have the right to spend it on my kids how I see fit. I have never once in our entire marriage tried to control or restrict how she spends money, but she does it to me all the time. She snapped and said fine, you can just go with the kids then and spend to your heart's content. I don't want to have anything to do with it, and got out of the car at the next stop sign. I begged her to get back in. I turned around the car and gave her several opportunities to get back in and I offered to give her a ride. She refused and literally walked 6 miles back home alone. I was quite shocked that she would do that, but proceeded to the mall where I spent 7 hours shopping with the kids getting lots of great stuff for school. I definitely didn't go overboard and spend like I was a celebrity, but we focused on getting what the kids needed with a healthy amount of things they wanted as well. What's the craziest thing you've witnessed at a wedding? Friend of mine got married to this dude at a cult. She'd been living there for a couple years, and soon after they had begun the courtship process. They would hold hands, go on long walks, but couldn't sleep together or even kiss until they tied the knot. Once we got there for the big day, we didn't realize it would be such an event. We saw her for maybe 2 minutes max the whole day, otherwise she was either busy or whisked away to a back room somewhere. Once the ritual starts, it was like 5 hours long. There was a pre-enactment, which is like a reenactment, only it predicts things to come. It predicted the apocalypse, where Jesus, the groom, would battle with the 7 deadly sins. He took a wooden sword and proceeded to fake battle 7 random dudes and win. Then there was a sermon about how Jesus, the groom, is like the savior in the relationship, and the church, the woman, is the vessel to receive his divine grace. Also, women are apparently some type of appliance, which must support their husband at all cost, and must always continue to do so. Also, no rubbers. So then there's a bunch of hymns, singing, prayers, dancing, more hymns, more prayers, for a couple hours. We take a break for some food. There was a play, I think. More stuff about how you die and are reborn when you accept Jesus. To love him is to die and give him your life, then the actual wedding ceremony. It's fire and blood. Brimstone and death. Together, until the apocalypse. His vows went something like, I purchase you with my blood, the blood of the Lord, and you are mine forever. Her vows are more like, I promise to be barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen and working the fields for the rest of my life. When they started talking about how marriage should only be between a man and woman and that the bond is sacred, I started fumbling for my keys. They kiss for the first time, ever. It looks so awkward. Then the entire wedding party gets up and starts chasing them. I mean, full sprint. We chase them out of their wedding tent, onto a dirt road. We chase them for a while, until they stop at a cabin. They bid farewell, and thank the guests. Afterwards, they proceed into the cabin to consummate their union. We mill about for a minute or two before we realize we should probably not be around to hear this. We left shortly after, and I got the most intoxicated I have ever been in my entire life and had a conversation with a pigeon that was outside the window. 9 months later she gave birth to her first child. I have not seen her since the wedding. Do you know why blood is thicker than water? After many years, I have finally decided it is time for me to post this somewhere. I have been seeing a therapist for over half my life, but I figured getting anything and everything out in the open will maybe do some good. I have been on Reddit for quite some while and I think it is time I add my story to Black Hole Revenge. I do not regret any actions nor would I take them back. I still feel guilty and dream of it often. When I was 12, my father hit me. It was the first time he hit me, but it was not the last. He abused me, my mother and my brother frequently. He was addicted to pills after a bad car wreck and addicted to alcohol. He apparently hit my mother a few times before I was 12. Over the years, the hitting became more and more frequent until I turned 16. My mom finally had enough of me, my little brother and her being his personal abuse package, and we moved away. We waited and left with no trace. No phones, no social media, nothing. No one knew except our neighbor Tim, who helped us pack and left the heavy stuff. Ever since then, I have started going by my middle name and we shortened our last name X. Adamson now is Adams. It was hard, 2 boys and 1 mom, it was hard for us to feel safe. Eventually everything turned out fine, depending on your definition. We eventually all got jobs and secured a small 2-bedroom apartment. My younger brother ended up falling in love and wanted to marry this girl. He never told her all the details, but enough for her to know shit happened, just not everything. Somehow, my aunt found out about the wedding. This was my dad's sister. My guess is my brother's fiance's family posted something and she saw it. I do not blame my aunt. No one knew about my dad, and after the incident we learned he said she left with another guy, and my dad being the 2 months before the wedding he found us and beat my brother so bad the wedding had to be called off. We reported it to the police, and nothing happened. He got questioned, interviewed, whatever. Yet served no jail time. He also broke into my mother's house, but thankfully she was not there, or else she may no longer be with us. When beating my brother he talked about how insulting it was we left and my mom turned us against him and how embarrassed he was of us. Years of therapy gone, my brother and my mother are once again back. Before we left I as well. My brother's fiancée is scared and her parents want her to call it off. This isn't a tough guy something snapped or I decided he would pay moment. I was afraid I was next. I wasn't trying to get revenge, I wanted safety. I remember that I almost pissed myself hearing he knew where we were. We moved a city over, we got temporary housing from a church-led foundation. We also got a restraining order from him from a lawyer the church helped provide. I got a job at the graveyard shift at a local fast food restaurant, and my brother and his fiancée took a hiatus for her safety, his decision. I also purchased my first firearm, that was legal. I joined Facebook, with my real actual name. Friended a couple of people that I knew from my hometown. Eventually my Facebook would get back to him, and sure enough it did. He messaged me one night while I was at work and I stared at it for a solid 3 minutes before my manager told me to put my phone away. Once on break, I went in the cold freezer and cried and cried and cried. I never messaged him back at all. After work, I went to the local park and posted a photo of the pond/fountain. I had been doing this previous nights as well, usually within a 30-minute time frame. The next night, same thing again, but with the name of the park sign in the background. Every night for about a week I walked through that park and around it waiting on him. Each night that I walked my hand was on the trigger. One night I was walking and after passing the parking lot, I heard someone walking behind me. Never, in my life have I ever felt so scared. I could barely hear the footsteps over my heart beating. I turned around and saw my father. My ears began ringing, I had shot him. I had closed my eyes, so I was unsure if I even was aiming for him. He never got a word out, and now I'm safe. I did get arrested. I did spend some time in jail. It was ultimately ruled self-defense, but I carried without a permit. So I had to go to jail for a few months and pay a fine. I got out of doing half the jail and the fine by doing community service and attending a class. What I told the police was different than what really happened. My father began yelling at me. Told me he tracked me down using Facebook and that he was going to unalive me. My wife is willing to forgive me for my affair, but I'm still in love with my affair partner, and I'm afraid I'm about to make more terrible decisions. I'm in a deeply depressed state right now. I understand that my actions have been those of a total scumbag, and I am not proud whatsoever of the hurt I've caused to those I love. It feels like the last year of my life was just one big blur of terrible decision making, and I'm paying the consequences now. For context, my wife and I have been together for 10 years, married for 7. We have 2 small children under the age of 5. A little over a year ago, I, 33 male, started going out after work with an older, also married, female coworker, 41 female, for drinks to vent about things going on at work. From the beginning, I knew this wasn't the most appropriate thing to do, but my wife, 34 female, didn't have concerns. She trusted me. Over time, our meetups became more frequent, more secretive, and an emotional affair developed. We would flirt via text, make time to see each other, etc. After about a month, we ended up making love, and it turned into a physical and emotional 100% romantic passionate love affair. We ended up seeing each other as much as we could, and she actually divorced her husband after a few months, not for me, but because her marriage was pretty bad. Long story short, we fell in love and have been together in secret for a year. She also changed jobs last year as to not let our relationship interfere with work. In the past few months, I told my wife I needed space and that I needed to stay with a friend. Well, I did not stay with a friend. I basically moved in with my affair partner for several weeks. Fast forward to a week ago, I got caught by my wife and I sat her down and told her everything. She asked me a million questions, and I answered everything truthfully. Everywhere we had been, the frequency of our lovemaking, all details of everything. I was so ashamed and full of guilt that I decided to lay everything on the table for her to be able to make a decision as to whether she wanted to stay. She took a few days, and came back to say she would like to work on our marriage and forgive me if I promised to cut all contact with my affair partner. She is willing to give me another chance, go to counseling, both individually and as a couple, and just start over. My relationship with my wife has always been very stable. She's an angel, she works with children, is a wholesome woman, takes care of me, and is beautiful. We never fight, and on paper it's the perfect marriage. To be honest, I don't even know why I began the affair. I believe I just got addicted to the rush, and the feeling of being desperately wanted by someone new. It was wrong, but I did it. On the other hand, my relationship with my affair partner has been a total toxic roller coaster of emotions. She is an alcoholic, has a past of serial cheating, cheated on her ex-husband dozens of times, has lied to me during our relationship about many things, and is overall just not a person of great character. Funny of me to say that, right? She is a high-level executive at a big company, so she is very smart, ambitious, and independent, very different from my humble, caring, family-oriented, innocent, young soul of a wife. However, I'm still madly in love with my affair partner. It's a totally toxic relationship. Even just a few weeks ago, I had to call the police for her blacking out, calling me names, and passing out on a city street. We have had dozens of violent fights, broken up several times, etc. My gut tells me I'm addicted to the toxic nature of the relationship with her. The awful lows make our highs feel so amazing. And I do feel in love, perhaps we can call it limerence, or infatuation, but I do care about her, a lot. I can say I love her. At this point, my heart and brain are pulling me in 2 separate directions. My affair partner is asking me to divorce my wife to be with her, saying that she wants me but needs me to leave my wife. If I'm being honest, that's what my heart wants right now, but my brain is telling me, hey dumb arse, you have this beautiful sweet woman who is your wife and mother of your children offering to give you a second chance after you broke her heart by cheating on her, and you're still wanting to be in a relationship with an abusive alcoholic woman with a decades-long history of infidelity and dishonesty. I needed to get this off my chest. I'm not sleeping, I'm not eating, I'm not productive at work. The other woman consumes my mind 24 hours a day and I crave her, but I know deep down it's my brain chemicals acting up, wanting the satisfaction of this rush, excitement, and her approval and affection. I'm considering leaving my wife for this other woman, and I know it sounds crazy. I know it's not the right choice. That being said, I also don't have these feelings with my wife. It's so hard to want to work on my marriage with my wife when the feelings I get from this other woman are so amazing. Right now, it feels like I'll never be able to feel in love the way I feel in love with my toxic affair partner. I need help. What's something that's considered normal that creeps you out immediately? 1. The map feature on Snapchat. I will never enable that. It's so weird. 2. Spitting everywhere and anywhere, no matter who's around or the circumstances. 3. When people kiss their family members on the mouth. Normal to them, extremely weird to the rest of us. 4. The Pledge of Allegiance. Americans grow up with that and you're all used to it. You have no idea how weird it seems to outsiders. A whole classroom of children chanting a national loyalty oath every day. 5. Every company creating an ecosystem requiring my home address and credit card and my birthday just to listen to some music or use some software. Not a shred of my identity is unsold at this point. 6. When people come to your door and knock or ring the bell and then peer in the window. 7. Having access to all your friends' locations at any time. 8. People making Instagrams for their babies and making captions as if the baby were writing it. 9. Touching a pregnant person's belly. Double creepiness if it's a stranger asking to feel the baby kick. Double again if they don't have permission first. 10. That people can be rich enough to basically buy their way out of legal issues. 11. People who bite their ice cream bars or popsicles. It makes me physically cringe. 12. Influencers' toxic positivity on Instagram. 13. What no hug. When saying goodbye to a person I'd never shown interest in touching. 14. Instagram accounts with nothing but selfies. Hundreds and hundreds of selfies. It totally creeps me out. 15. The whole we're all family here at the workplace. It's like some weird brainwashing to get you to enjoy your job more than you should. Like no, you're not my family. I'm here to do work and get paid, and that's the only reason I'm here. 16. Chewing noises. I've worked very hard at not being completely incapable of eating near people. Please, close your mouth. Mayonnaise. It's a horrible condiment and an even worse instrument. 18. That vivid orange color of American cheese. 19. Touching my computer screen. Get your disgusting greasy fingers away from my screen. 20. When I sit on a warm toilet seat. It really freaks me out. It's like the ghost of previous butt cheeks. 21. Licking stuff off your fingers. Dunno why, it just grosses me out. 22. This will definitely wind up on a TikTok video with Subway surfers in the background. Lady cuts me off from doing my job because she thinks I'm stealing. I work at this fancy golf course during the summers while in college, and I did it in high school too. One day, I was at the driving range, getting things ready, when a lady hitting golf balls came up to me, looking all red, and said, "Hey, you can't use that cart, did your grandparents tell you?" I told her, "No, ma'am, I work here, so I can use the cart." Then she looked really sour and said, "Don't trick me, I know you're staying with your grandparents for the 4th of July, and you took a cart from one of the workers here, just to show off." I was totally surprised, and I didn't know what to say. This lady was just harassing me for no reason, even after I made it clear that I worked at the golf course. So, I said, "Okay, ma'am, I need to get back to work now." She grabbed my arm and insisted, "No, you're coming with me. I know the boss, and he'll kick you out himself." I smiled and told her, "All right, fine. I'll go with you." We brought her cart back to the clubhouse and went to the boss's office. She ranted about how I supposedly stole a cart and pretended to work here. She got really loud, and when she was done, she asked me, "What do you have to say for yourself?" I looked at the boss and said, "Well, Dad, you see the thing is." She interrupted, "Wait, this is your son? You let your son go and steal carts from the workers?" My dad just calmly said, "Ma'am, he's an employee here, no problem at all." She got really embarrassed and just left. It was so funny watching her reaction as I started talking to my dad. I'm just glad they got a free 5-minute break at work without having to take lunch.
I made my boyfriend pay for an Uber because he didn't get me off. I usually drive my boyfriend to work because he doesn't have a valid license. DUI. The charges were dropped, but he doesn't drive anymore. Tonight we went out drinking because my birthday is tomorrow, and we made love afterwards. We made love for about an hour. I asked him to give me top after I gave him top, and he said no. I was annoyed by this, but let it progress. Halfway through, I asked if I could get on top to grind so I could finish from my bean. That's the only way I can finish. After 5 minutes of asking, he finally let me. But he wouldn't get fully stiff, and when he finally did, he immediately put it in. So, I didn't finish. Then we went to missionary-ish and he finished. He had bad hiccups, so I helped him get rid of them. Then I asked him to use his hand to help me finish. He said no. So I said okay, then I'll just do it myself and started to slide my hand down. He said I need to go somewhere else with that and that it's gross. I asked him like 20 times why he called it gross that I wanted to finish. He said it's gross for me to just self-pleasure next to him. Saying how would you feel if I was just self-pleasuring next to you? I said yeah, except you get to finish every time. How is it gross that I want to finish too? His response was a continuous stream of shut up and leave me the hell alone. Eventually I gave up on trying to finish. I was crying because he called me gross for this. So I just asked him to please cuddle me. He refused. He kept telling me to leave him alone and to stop bothering him. I said please, cuddling literally takes no effort. He still kept telling me to just leave him alone. So I said okay, then you can Uber to work tomorrow. I mean, I kind of feel bad, but at the same time, I just asked for him to care about me too and he didn't. This isn't a one-time thing. Every time we make love he never cares about my pleasure or making me finish. He will only give me top if we do 69, so he is receiving 2. I have told him I cannot finish like that because I have to be solely focused on the feeling and he just doesn't care. It just sucks. I feel like a warm hole instead of an equal partner, and I wish he would care about me finishing and enjoying myself too. Would I be wrong if I refused to drive him to work and make him Uber because he refused to get me off too? I think I'm going to stand on my decision when we wake up, whether that makes me a jerk or not.
What's wrong with me? Am I just not normal? 19F looking for serious advice. I often feel like there's something about me that's different, abnormal, and wrong. This perception seems to be the reason why people dislike me, although I can't quite pinpoint what it is that makes me so unlikable. I don't fit into the mold of what is considered normal, not in a way that seeks attention or annoys others, but in a way that leaves me feeling like an outcast. Throughout my life, From primary school to high school and now college, it has seemed as though every person I've encountered automatically dislikes me and harbors a sense of hatred towards me. Despite trying to improve my social skills and reach out to others while in college, I haven't seen any improvements. I remain an outcast, feeling awkward and nervous in social interactions. People seem to dislike me even before I have a chance to speak, causing me to question what it is about me that repels them. This week, as well as the previous week, I overheard people openly expressing their dislike for me, commenting on my appearance and criticizing my behavior. To exacerbate matters, people frequently make fun of the way I talk. I've been told that I have a weird voice and speak in a manner that is abnormal. It's as if everything about me, my actions, my words, is deemed strange and not in line with the norms of society. Regardless of my efforts, it seems that everything I do is considered weird, different, and far from what is considered normal. Adding to my distress, I genuinely believe that I am extremely unattractive. I can confidently say that I've never seen anyone as ugly and hideous as myself. This belief has been reinforced by the constant comments about my looks throughout my life, especially during high school where I was severely bullied for my appearance. Everywhere I go, people stare at me and make derogatory comments about how repulsive I look. The negative comments are not figments of my imagination. They are real, to the point where people have taken pictures of me without my knowledge or consent. People have laughed, made offensive comments to their friends, and even recorded me. These incidents have made me feel utterly hideous, as if I am not even human. It's no surprise that no one wants to be around me or interact with me. I want to clarify that I don't share these thoughts seeking sympathy or attention. I genuinely perceive myself as repulsive, and these comments about my appearance only reinforce that belief. It's not surprising to me that people hate me, as I experienced the disdain of classmates and teachers throughout my school years. I was often avoided, not selected for groups or partnerships, and the few times someone did pair up with me, it was met with disagreement or disgust. Unfortunately, my college experience has been no different. The tutors there exhibited a strong dislike towards me, while my classmates showed indifference and kept their distance. I once overheard a tutor saying, "I don't like her, there's just something about her." My classmates also openly expressed their avoidance of me, stating that they didn't want to be around me. It has only been a few days since I started college, and the same pattern of hatred and avoidance has repeated itself. People have made more comments about how ugly and disgusting I am, solidifying the notion that I am an outcast who doesn't belong. This recurring pattern makes me realize that the issue lies within me, and I'm not blaming anyone else for not wanting to be around me. I am genuinely repulsive, and I wouldn't want to be around myself either. Regardless of where I go or which new school I attend, the problem persists. I never feel comfortable. Instead, I constantly feel isolated and judged negatively. I have an overwhelming sense of not being like everyone else, as if I'm not even a real person. I'm consistently regarded as strange and out of place, and I always feel like an outcast. Even strangers exhibit disgust towards me. They give me disapproving looks, cross the street to avoid me, and openly express their repulsion. I've heard people say, "Look at her, what is that?" The disdain and repulsed expressions are a common occurrence, as if I am a disgusting being unfit to be in their presence. I'm burdened with guilt whenever I engage with others or simply exist in proximity to people. This is why I tend to avoid going out. Even during my primary school years, teachers disliked me, and I experienced bullying. I would often feel overwhelmed and cry in class, only to be mocked and disregarded. My classmates didn't like me either, and nothing has changed since then. I want to emphasize that I am not projecting my insecurities onto others. The feelings of hatred towards me are genuine, and it seems as though everyone genuinely despises me. Ultimately, what I'm trying to comprehend is why I feel so different, abnormal, and not normal. I don't feel like anyone else, and I struggle to act and speak in a way that aligns with societal norms. It's challenging for me to pretend to be normal when, in all honesty, I genuinely don't feel normal in any capacity. I promised my brother on his deathbed I would take care of his son, but my wife wants to put him up for adoption because she's sick of him. My brother died back in May and he requested me to take care of his son in case he passed, because his wife had died a couple months prior. He had entrusted me and I agreed because I loved my brother dearly. I am financially stable, and I am prepared to be a father. I asked my wife first before I gave my brother an answer, though, and she was ecstatic. She agreed immediately because she has always wanted to be a mother and she loves taking care of my nephew Aiden. So, we took him into our family and he is very well behaved and intelligent, but taking care of a kid is difficult. I work all day from Monday to Friday. I try my best to spend time with Aiden, but it is extremely tiring. However, I am willing to make as many sacrifices as possible to raise him properly. I love him with all my heart and I want to carry out my brother's wish no matter what. My wife stays home and watches him while I work during the day. She initially had no problem, but after 2 weeks, she was tired too. Now, nearly 6 months later, she is exhausted and somehow completely done with Aiden. 2 days ago, she told me that she wanted to stop taking care of Aiden. I was shocked. I knew it was tiring, but we promised my brother that we would take care of him. She said she understood, but she just couldn't take it anymore. She can't handle him and has gotten sick of him. I said I would try to help out more. I could try paying someone too so that she could get some rest. She said no because that meant spending more money on him, which is also something she didn't want to do. I got angry at this point and reminded her we agreed. Besides, what would we do with Aiden? She said, just give him up for adoption. I said no and she got furious. She said that I didn't know what it was like to take care of him full time. I said that I would do 50% of the housework, get a helper, or a babysitter, but nothing I said would change her mind. She said she's had this idea for a while and the more she thought about it, the more she wanted to do it. I told her I needed to think, and she said okay. Honestly, there was nothing to think about, I was not giving him up for adoption. A week passed, and I thought she was going to press me about it, but there was nothing on her part. That made me really suspicious, so I asked her about it. She didn't give me a clear answer and just said she was giving me time to talk about it. I didn't believe that, so I talked to Aiden. He was very quiet and hesitant to talk to me, which never happened before. After some time, he admitted that my wife has been very neglectful towards him. She barely feeds him, and when he begs for food, she gets annoyed and tells him to leave her alone. She sometimes refuses to take him to school because she doesn't want to wake up early, other times she's late to pick him up because she forgets. I couldn't believe this was happening right under my nose. I asked my boss for some time off, and luckily I had enough in my savings to do that so that I could take care of him instead. I got to see what my wife does all day to claim she's tired all the time, but she just sits around and watches TV. Maybe for some time she was putting some effort in, but now she was acting like a degenerate. She would just make messes left and right. I honestly don't know why she was doing all of this, but when I asked, she said it was because now I was going to know what she went through. Which is also why she wasn't helping me, because I never helped her, which isn't true. I always did my part whenever I was around. I slept on the couch for a week because I just couldn't be near her. The next day, she brought up adoption again. She told me she didn't care what my decision was, she was already in the progress of making this adoption happen. I went on a date with a therapist. Big mistake. Last September my ex-wife and I filed for divorce. We were separated. One of my best friends says I should try dating. She's never led me astray, so I say screw it, why not? The first girl I match with on Hinge seems nice. We talk for a few days since I'm on a business trip and plan to go out when I get back. She's a therapist who works with neurodivergent kids. We chat a bit and all is good. We go on our first date after work on a Tuesday. I pick her up at her place, and go to my favorite pizza joint in her area. The date starts a bit awkward as first dates do, and she then tells me, I can't wait to tell you I'm pregnant. Okay, that was weird, maybe it's the nerves. Understand, we had no booze at this point, so I think she's just nervous. Great. A few minutes later she's telling me about her parents who live near the Wisconsin-Minnesota border, and we are in the Chicagoland area. These parents end up showing up, and sit down with us. Yet, they lived in the Great White North. So here I am against the wall of the booth with her dad sitting next to me. She's across from me and her mom next to her. Crap. Okay, I guess I'm paying for their meal too. Double date, great. The mom and dad tell me they've heard a lot about me, yada yada. How much could they know? They talk about what it's like working for a vocational school. So I start freaking out as I've only said I'm a school admin, nothing more, not where I work. I say it's great, but I'm looking to go back to the middle school or elementary next year. Her dad says he can't wait to have a son-in-law like me. The mom says she can't wait to have me marry into the family. Awkward. They were drinking, so I give them a pass. The awkward evening continues, the yada yada get to know you crap. We start leaving and I pick this chick up, so I've got to drop her off. My grandma raised a gentleman, you know? I figured I'd do that and dip, but nope. We get back, and her parents park next to me. Crap. They invite me up, and mom said she baked a great pumpkin pie earlier today. Well, I love me some pumpkin pie, so I decide screw it, I might as well get something out of this night, and I had some pie. Truthfully, it was some of the best pumpkin pie I've ever had. I try to leave and they weren't really letting me by giving me more pie or starting a new conversation topic. My best friend, one who told me to start dating, ends up calling me and asks what's up. I took the call in the bathroom and she comes up with this plan. I'm going to go pick up my friend Eddie, because she thought I shouldn't use a girl's name, with his flat tire. Great, I got an out. She says she needs to walk her dog, annoying, yapping dog, rubbing his butt on everything and dragging his butt across the floor, just a very poorly trained dog. Dang it. Okay, fine. So she comes with me and walks me down. The mom comes along, and I'm standing there trying to leave as this chick takes her dog for a crap. The mom says it's nice to meet me yada yada, and says, I'm so glad my daughter found you. I didn't think she'd be able to settle down since we've had her committed 3 times. And then she walks away. What the heck? Bomb dropped. I'm panicking now, even sweating a bit. I turn to get in my car and the chick is right there, hugs me, tries to kiss me yada yada, and then she tells me, I love you, and I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with you. I just say, great. Gotta go. You know, friend needs help. I get in the car, and this chick is in my rear mirror and she's calling me. I pick up and she said, you didn't say you love me. My best friend calls. Oops. Hang on, important call, and picks up. I tell my buddy this and she's laughing her butt off. I'm scared crapless at this point, thinking all the headlights in my rear view mirror are her, so I start speeding for the highway. I'm speeding away and I get pulled over. The cop comes up asking why. I tell him everything. It took me a good 5 to 6 minutes to get him to understand. He noticed I have Wisconsin plates and all he says is, bro. And gives me great advice, never put your willy in a crazy. Thanks, Brashacho. The cop feels sorry for me and escorts me to the highway. Great. Freedom. This chick texts me and I try to ghost her. Now, I left out an important detail. I went on a school night, and I was wearing spirit wear with my school logo on it. Once you know the name, it's hard not to find, as it's the only type of school like this in my county. I go to my boss the next day and tell him, and he says I'm an idiot for wearing my work shirt. He laughs his butt off about the whole situation, and then asks if I blocked her. Crap, that's a good idea. So I do it, and he tells me I'm an idiot again for not thinking this through. She figured out where I worked, and starts calling my desk, asking when we are going out. She leaves a message saying she wants to be engaged by the time she's 30, which was weeks away, literally the next month, since we went over birthdays. At this point I'm freaking out. I have a school resource officer in my building and I tell him what happened. I gave him her name and he told me he'd take care of it if she came by, but also told me to move my car to the back, gated and can't see. This dude's a saint and it was a great idea. The chick shows up asking to see me, and security tells her I don't work here. She gets snotty with the SRO, and gets escorted out. She continues to call my desk phone pleading with me to give her a chance. She finds my sister and my best friend all on Facebook, and tells them we are soulmates. I tell them to block her. This chick was crazy. I got her to calm the F out when I told her I'm going to report her for harassment to her licensing board. All bullcrap, no idea if that would do anything. And that, kids, is the story of how I met your mother. Kidding, but damn was I scared of dating for a bit. My unhinged mother named me after her late husband behind my father's back. So I demanded to change my name and she refused. My mom was married to another guy before she was married to my dad. Her first husband was her childhood best friend, her first and only love until he died. My mom never loved anyone else again. She always had him very present in our lives. We had loads of photos in the house of him. She would talk about him a lot and it was pretty clear she was still super in love with him. She also switched her wedding ring from my dad out for her original wedding ring when my dad wasn't around. I remember her changing rings a lot when I was a younger kid. She met and married my dad but she never loved him. She married him because she was turned down as a single adoptive parent and because people in her life told her she should find a way to be happy again. I'm their only kid and she named me after her first husband. My dad didn't realize it for years. Her husband's legal name was James. It's the one most people used for him. But my mom called him Hunter. She told dad she just really loved the name and my dad liked it too, so he agreed. He only knew her first husband as James, so never made the connection. I was 10 when my dad found out. He found some letters that he initially thought were meant for me but realized they were to the first husband. They ended up arguing for like 2 weeks straight and that's how I learned mom's feelings toward dad and why she married him. I would sit up and listen to them when I was meant to be sleeping because it weirded me out to learn I was named after her first husband. I wanted my name changed and my dad does too, but mom refuses to give her consent, which we need, and the judge has insisted both parents have to consent. My relationship with mom is not good anyway. I'm not the kid she wanted because I'm not James' kid. But she also refuses to let me go and just let me be dad's kid. She'll sometimes try some performative parenting but mostly it's sort of like we're roommates when I'm at her house instead of dad's. My mom's house has photos of her. And James all over the place. It's like a shrine to him. 2 days ago she was crying to her former in-laws that we hate her and how awful my dad is to her. When the call ended I told her she doesn't get to act like the victim when she lied to dad about my name and she won't let me change it too. She called me a self-absorbed brat and told me I would never understand her grief. I told her I understood the loss was devastating for her but she used us and never even loved us and that was crappy. What is the weirdest object you've used for self-fun and how did you use it?
Growing up, I had this really big gorilla plushie. He was my secret boyfriend forever. He showed me my first fun time. I miss him.
I've used a warmed-up banana peel as a thingy.
My day bed had this scrolly type of metal on the sides and on top. The ends had these gold metal balls on the ends. It always looked like it would feel great against my spot that men can't find. So one night, I got myself over the side, one leg on each side. I lowered myself down onto it and felt the cool metal against the spot through my drawers. I liked it a lot, but as I would rub back and forth, it felt like the ball on the end of the scrolly metal wanted to be inside. So I carefully risked it all and lowered myself down on one of those metal balls on the end of the bed frame. As I moved back and forth, I got closer and closer until finally I ignored my fear and let it happen. A small amount of pressure was all I needed to feel that pop, and then I let the kitty cat eat the metal ball. First the top, but then I got more and more brave to let the kitty cat eat the full length of that long metal. Once I knew it wasn't going to hurt me, I had fun with that bed so many times. When I woke up in the mornings, I couldn't help giggle how messy I left it and had to clean it before someone saw it.
What's the most ridiculous substance you've gotten high on? In high school my friends and I would down a bottle of robachucine to get high on the active ingredient dextromethorphan. One night, the crew and I were feeling a little more adventurous than normal. So the 5 of us traveled around town stealing bottles of our favorite cough syrup. We each drank 2 bottles. The night started off great, we began to giggle more than usual. Everything we saw began to have trails that followed its movement. We were ready for a great night. Then things got weird. The trip began to set in. Don't be fooled by the idea that because cough medicine is widely accessible the recreational effects of it cannot be as consequential as say acid or mushrooms. I've taken acid, shrooms, smoked a lot of grass, but nothing could ever live up to my experiences tonight. We began in the basement. There were 5 of us including myself. I was laying on my couch. It's one of those couches that you sort of sink into whenever you sit in it. Well, as I laid my head down my face began to sink further and further into the pillow. At this point, hallucinations begin to take effect. As my right eye slowly fell under the surface of my couch, I could see a world in which little tiny dwarfs, miniature-sized dwarfs, were building a pyramid. There were many stipulations to the pyramid. It was being built to praise their king Jaffa. It was hierarchical too, as there were social classes within this city of dwarfs. Just as my mind is getting ready to explode by the mere fact that I have dwarfs living on my couch, my friend pulls me up to go outside. I have had a decent-sized swing set in my backyard from when I was little, and somehow we found our way to it. We began swinging, and as soon as my feet left the ground I began to believe that I was flying. I'm not sure how I came to this conclusion. I knew I was pivoting on a swing, but for one reason or another I was convinced. I'm not sure if it was to impress my friends or the sheer fact I was tripping balls. I jumped from the swing and landed on my ditch which was full of mud. Dirty and in pain, I returned to the house. I thought we had been outside for around half an hour. It had been 3 hours. I had work at 8 a.m., and it was now 5 a.m. I am completely tripping balls at this point. I know I am inside my house, but nothing around reminds me of this. For a moment I begin to think I am in another country. I saw people who were not there. My friends were still outside, and I had completely forgotten about them. 6 a.m. rolls around and I am still very messed up. It's 7 a.m. and I am now convinced I have to call into work. I go to my computer. It takes me 30 minutes to find my retail store number, which I had in my cell phone contacts. I had no idea the trip would last so long. I held my breath and dialed. The store didn't open until 9, so there was nobody on the other end. One no call no show and I was fired. So I did what any responsible adult would do. I went to work. And this is where things got crazy. I rode my bike to the store. I lived about 2 minutes away, walked inside and went immediately to the bathroom. My eyes were almost all black. I was sweating. I had mud on my pants from the swing the night before, and to top it off I confused my work shirt with a regular t-shirt of the same color. I grabbed a store sweater and went right to the back, and tried to remember how to perform my job. I still had 1 more hour before the store opened. Hopefully the trip would begin to fade a bit. It didn't. I walked out onto the floor of the corporate outdoor sporting goods retailer knowing I had no business there. A woman came up to me asking to look for help, and as soon as our eyes met her face changed. She had a horrid look on her face, and sort of collectively walked past me. I knew I was fucked. I had to get out of there. So I did the right thing. I hid in the bathroom. Finally some coworkers came after me to check out what happened. I pretended to have diarrhea. The most logical thing I had done all day was to pull that out of my butt, no pun intended. My boss looked at me, and said, "Look at you, you're all sweaty and tense. You need to go home until you feel better." I was saved. The trip lasted another 5 or 6 hours.
My homophobic sister kidnapped my kids because I love kitties. She said I'll corrupt them and turn them into little homos. I don't know how to get my children back from my sister. I, 29, grew up in an extremely conservative household. They raised me to be the perfect housewife to any man I met because that was my place as a woman. The same old speech about how women belong in the kitchen was something I heard every day. I have always had trouble finding a connection to men of any kind. When I looked at a man's schlong, I always thought it looked like a floppy meat stick. I hated it. When I was younger, I had no idea why I was like that, so I asked my sister about it. She flipped out on me and snitched to our parents, calling me a creepy kitty licker. They immediately put me in conversion therapy. Obviously, it was the worst years of my life. When I came out, I was the perfect straight woman they wanted as a daughter. They arranged a marriage for me with some 35-year-old from our church, and off I went. My husband was an all-right guy, but he would often force me to kiss him or touch him. I went along with it, but I began realizing my sister was probably right. I was a lesbian. 5 years later, 2 kids later, I managed to break free from my marriage. I finally could be as fruity as I wanted to be. I decided to come out to my sister, and she unsurprisingly started calling me homophobic slurs. She said that I was going to start touching my kids with my rainbow tongue. I thought she'd come around eventually, but things escalated in a way I never expected. Last night, she kidnapped my children while I was at work. I came home to find the house empty, and I immediately knew something was terribly wrong. I called my sister, and she confessed that she took the kids because she didn't want them around a lesbian mother. She said that they deserved to be in a house with a mother and a father, not some kitty-loving F-slur woman. When she said that, I heard my ex-husband laugh. A little in the background. I don't know what I did to deserve this. How can I get them back?
Today's 5th grade unnecessary morning conversation. Student A, when I die and go to heaven, I hope I get my wings the first day. Student B, what kind you getting? I hope they got lemon pepper.
Parents who have disabled children, do you regret having them? F yes, I hate that little vegetable. My husband's daughter is 13 and was born mentally disabled. She is not very high functioning, but can be so sweet and friendly. However, most of the time she is extremely stubborn, unhygienic, antagonistic, and has explosive outbursts which result in her trying to hurt us. She lives with her mom and visits us on the weekends. She has an older brother whom she absolutely plagues. I mean, this boy can't even go to the bathroom without her following him and juggling the knot the entire time. She sits practically on top of him on the couch and then cries that he's teasing her. If we tell her to move away, she sits and stretches out her arm or leg so she's touching him in some way. She stares at whoever told her to move like daring them to say something to her so it constantly feels like a showdown. If he's sitting behind her she holds up a pillow so he can't see the TV for no reason. It is insanely miserable. It is so unfair to this kid that he just has to deal with it all the time. He's 15 so he can luckily go off with his friends but they can't even come here together on weekends. It's so tense and miserable. She absolutely loves me and while that's sweet, she seeks out my attention when I'm already overwhelmed and will not stop until I look at whatever she's showing me and react in some way. She will literally spend 30 minutes if she has to poking me so I look at some stupid drawing she made. I once looked at one of these drawings and it was a disturbing depiction of her unaliving her brother. She follows me everywhere and asks a million questions when I'm just trying to get through the day. She also has a litany of disgusting behaviors that I am having a ton of problems dealing with. She got her period last year and she gets blood everywhere. She lies if I even ask her if she's having her period. I usually find blood somewhere and guess for myself. She hates showering and her hair is disgustingly greasy and she has awful body odor. If we make her shower, it's an absolute battle. She will make the entire house miserable over the smallest issue and once destroyed the bathroom while showering just to spite us. She shouts and pouts and goes to tease everyone else, including the younger kids and the dog. She follows her dad and tells him he's stupid. She follows me, and if I ignore her tantrum, she screams my name until I react to her. Last week, out of absolutely nowhere, she took a poop on the floor of my 5-year-old daughter's room. They're probably the closest out of all the kids and the behavior was totally new and unexpected. I found the it and asked her what happened. Of course she lied and said it wasn't her. She lies about absolutely everything. You cannot get the truth no matter how hard you try. She knows that at our house you don't get in trouble for telling the truth, but even so she lies all the time. So just the conversation was a 45-minute affair. Finally, after like 29 different versions, she admitted to pooping on the floor. When I asked her why she pooped on the floor, she said because it was fun. She also admitted to doing it at her grandparents' house, in their bedroom. She never told anyone, just apparently took a dump and just left it for them to find. I'm so exhausted by her. My husband just asked me if she could come this weekend and I got the biggest pit in my stomach.
What are the strangest house rules you've seen in a person's house? I was around 8, when I went to a friend's place for a playdate and asked for a cup of water. Friend's mum pulls out one of the biggest glasses 8-year-old me had seen and filled it to the brim. I was only used to the small plastic cups at this stage, so was not used to such a large amount of water. After drinking just over a quarter of the glass, I went to go pour it out because I didn't want the rest. Friend stopped me and said that we weren't allowed to pour out water, we had to drink it. 8-year-old me thought that was weird, but looking back, sure, good way to teach kids not to waste water, especially here in Australia where droughts are so common. So if I wasn't allowed to pour it out, what could I do with it? I thought I would just leave it for later. Friend once again stopped me and explained I wasn't allowed to leave it, I had to drink it all. I said I wasn't thirsty anymore when her mum walked in, and told me that water wasn't allowed to be wasted in this house and I better drink it all. Like right then and there. If you wanted water, you weren't allowed to leave it and come back later. You had to sit there and finish it. 8-year-old me tried to argue why I couldn't leave it for later, and the mum got pissed and had me sit at the kitchen bench stool and finish this massive glass. I sat there grumpily for ages trying to finish this thing so I could go back to playing. I remember I was getting really uncomfortable because I needed to pee, and about 3/4 into the cup I flat out peed my pants. When I told the mom, she ended up getting even madder. I get teaching kids not to just waste water, but them not letting me leave it to save for later was ridiculous.
What event in your life still F's with you to this day? There was a girl next door to my grandparents' house that I had the biggest crush on. Her name was Becca. We had known each other from the time I was really little. We were both coming into the ages of liking the opposites at the same time, and we had similar troubled childhoods. Becca lived with her grandparents, too, somewhere after holding hands, but before our first kiss, Becca gave me a ring. She borrowed it from her grandpa and needed it back the next day. I was on cloud 9. With excitement I showed my mom the ring. She asked my grandparents to borrow their truck and told me to get in and make sure I brought the ring. I had no idea what was going on. We pulled up to the jewelry store at Eureka and Telegraph and she asked to see the ring. She went inside, no kids were allowed, and came out about 20 minutes later. Then, we went to McDonald's, the first time I'd eaten anything but food pantry food in at least a year. She said the jewelry store needed to borrow that specific ring for a few weeks to clean it up. I asked what I was supposed to tell Becca had happened to it, and she said to tell her that I had lost it. I never saw the ring again, and Becca never talked to me again.
Company recruits me for senior position, brings me to their HQ, project gets cancelled while I'm interviewing and I'm supposed to pay for the trip? I don't think so. During the dot-com boom in the late 90s, I became somewhat well known for my expertise with a now somewhat obsolete networking technology. I ended up getting heavily recruited by a big telecom firm in Denver to run the technical side of a huge networking project they had underway. After multiple phone interviews, I was invited out for the big in-person sit-down, a 2-day affair where I met with the big dogs, other techies, HR, etc. It was a pretty killer opportunity. Took the trip. First day of meetings went great, I felt it was a great match, etc. I did sense there was some tension between two groups over network architecture. Turned out that was one of the reasons they were bringing in someone more senior who could finalize the approach and get the project moving. That was fine, all part of the job, whatever. Got wined and dined after the first day, was definitely feeling like the job was a match and that I'd be moving to Denver. Went in the second day, and after another round of interviews the division head takes me to lunch. That's when it all blew up. While we were at lunch, the firm's senior management canned the entire project and fired every person associated with it. Apparently there was a huge internal political war going on. This project was ground zero for the big battle and this division just lost. We get back from lunch and the manager escorts me to HR where we're going to sit down and go over their offer. Instead he's told what's going on and that he's out of a job along with everyone else on the project. At this point I was told to leave. No apologies, it was just shitty luck for me. WTF? Okay then, I'm gone. I get back to the hotel and there's a voicemail for me asking me to call the HR people. I'm pissed but I call. They tell me they've had to cancel my return ticket and that I'd need to pay for the hotel myself for now, but that if I would submit an expense report they might be able to get me a check. There's a second voicemail from the front desk asking me to provide a credit card for the stay, and then I get a call on my cell phone from the car rental company which I didn't answer. Turns out they also wanted my credit card. Flock, that. I called the airline and they said my reservation had indeed been cancelled. But they also acknowledged that the reservation was paid for using a fully refundable ticket, which I was holding and which back in the 90s was essentially as good as cash. Said they wouldn't know for certain if I could board until I showed up at the counter with the physical ticket. Great, just flocking great. I'm on the hook for several thousand in airfare, nice hotel and rental car after taking several days of vacation from my job for this interview? I don't think so. Here's the revenge. I packed my bags and loaded up the rental car, left the keys in hotel room door, drove the rental car back to Dallas, stayed overnight in Amarillo, dropped the rental at the Hertz lot at DFW Airport, took their shuttle to the terminal I'd left my car at and drove home. Over the next few months I got several nasty phone calls from their HR and accounting departments demanding I pay them back for the trip, including paying for the $700 drop-off fee for the car. Never answered them, of course, just let them go to voicemail. Eventually got a demand letter from their legal department, paid an attorney a nominal fee to send them a demand for compensation, threatened a lawsuit letter. Never heard from the firm again. My girlfriend and I went through something and now she is traumatized. I am mainly posting this to get you guys to maybe give me advice. Lord knows I could really use it. My girlfriend and I of 5 years went through a pretty bad event. It happened about 6 months ago, and I don't want to rush her recovery or make her feel like a burden, but I mostly just want to know how I can help her. To explain, my girlfriend is 20 years old, and I, male, am 21. I have a friend who is 27, but he wasn't ever really my friend but more really a friend of friends. 6 months ago, I had a severe argument with him outside his motel room. I don't know why he was in a motel room that day, but he is a really sketchy guy, so I didn't want to know. The argument was about how he kept making sexual comments towards my girlfriend. I told him I didn't like it, and he needed to stop. He would always say, she should be with someone like me, and what I would do to have her in my bed. He told me that I should just suck it up and be glad he was not trying to steal her from me. A little later, the argument gets more intense, and we are both about to get physical. My girlfriend came to check in on me since I left her waiting in the car, and I didn't think it would take long. This guy sees my girlfriend and laughs, takes her into his room, by force, locks me out, and opens the curtains. The entrance she took was behind the other guy, so he was standing between us. He's supermassive, and I can't stand a chance against him. I'm watching him throw my girlfriend on the bed and get violent with her as she's sobbing and fighting as much as she can. I'm screaming for help and trying to break down the door, but no one is around. After a minute, I eventually got the door open with a fire extinguisher in my hand, and the first thing I did was hit him as hard as I could with it over his head. To this day, I wish I could settle this with other people around. My girlfriend is okay physically. He had punched and hit her but was about to rope her. We called the cops and explained everything. After, I found out that I had killed him, but I wasn't jailed since I was found innocent of protecting my girlfriend. Now, 6 months later, I'm still shaken up by everything, but I can't even imagine how my girlfriend is. She is in therapy and support groups, but I can still tell she isn't okay. I want to be there for her. I love her so much, and it hurts that I put her in that situation. Even if it wasn't my intention, I didn't think about how anything could go wrong.
Names you shouldn't name your kid today. Knew a girl named Isis. It was a rough time. Gaylord probably isn't very popular nowadays. My mom is in her late 60s and her name is Gabriel, but she goes by Gay. Obviously in context this means happy, but I don't not fail to laugh every time she says nice to meet you, I'm Gay. My name is Gay. This is my son. Alexa.
Have you ever had a deep conversation with yourself? Today, I, 29M, found myself sitting alone in the car, running errands while my kids were at their swimming club. During this quiet moment, thoughts started swirling in my mind. My wife is currently on vacation with her family in South Africa, and I've been missing her immensely. Reflecting on the past 5 years of our life together, I realize that they have been the best years of my life, and I truly enjoy having her by my side. She leads a busy life with various activities like tailoring and Zumba classes, and lately, I felt the need to have more quality time with her. Thankfully, we have discussed this, and she is willing to make changes to accommodate that. While sitting alone today, I had a conversation with myself, and I came to a realization. I feel the need to prioritize my personal interests and hobbies, particularly motorcycling. However, I have never taken the steps to actually pursue these activities. Additionally, I have realized that I tend to be a people pleaser, always trying to live up to others' expectations. My wife has mentioned this to me before, and today it finally sank in that she is right. I have spent my life conforming to others' thoughts and feelings without giving myself the space to explore my own desires and needs. My wife has granted me the freedom to do so, but I have failed to take advantage of this opportunity, still feeling trapped by expectations. What steps can I take to break free from these habits? How can I release the pressure to always conform? At this point, it feels like my dreams, goals, and desires have been projected onto me by others. I yearn to break free from this cycle and cultivate a true sense of self. I want to find a balance where I can express my emotions while still thinking rationally. Currently, it feels like there is a divide, and I need to bridge that gap. Thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts. I hope to receive helpful advice and comments. I want to become the best version of myself because my wife deserves to be with that kind of person, even if I am not that person today. My girl said her ex satisfied her more than I ever did. I heard my girlfriend of 3 years talking about how much better her ex was to her friends. She went a group FaceTime with all of her girlfriends and got drunk out of her mind. She was sitting with her laptop about 5 feet away from our bed at her desk. She thought I was asleep, even if I was. She said this with me literally 5 feet away from me. We had slept together and I thought I made her finish. After she was done I went to sleep. I woke up 3 hours later, and to her laughing. She sounded very drunk. I tried to not just go back to sleep. Before I could, I overheard her and her girlfriends talking about intimacy. She said intimacy was okay and sometimes she just faked it and let me get mine. I was hurt. Then they started talking about their best intimate experiences. She said her ex gave her the most intense finishing she ever experienced. She said she would finish so hard she would lose total control of her legs. His schlong was apparently big enough to the point where she felt completely filled, and hit her deep spots. Apparently 3 inches longer than mine. She said she missed being able to finish like that and he effed her better than any man has. At that point I was near tears. I sat there for another, trying not to cry so she wouldn't hear me. She eventually hung up. When she got back in bed she noticed if I was awake, and asked me if I was up. I told her that I just felt the bed move and that woke me up. She then said she loved me and she would see me in the morning. This was about 2 and I stayed awake that night. I haven't been able to sleep or eat or anything for the last 3 days. I don't know what to do. I've been trying to be better in bed for her since we first got together, and 3 years of practice still can't beat raw talent. I've never felt like less of a man. At this point I feel selfish for even staying with her when she is obviously so dissatisfied with me. Her ex cheated on her and he dumped her. When she found out, she would have stayed with him. I feel like I'm nothing compared to his memory. We haven't had intimacy in the last 3 days because I can barely even stomach the thought of trying to pleasure her. I don't know what I can do at this point. I love her so much and I've been thinking about proposing to her, but I don't know if I can anymore. My girl said her ex satisfied me more than I ever did. After the 8th day of me never initiating intimacy with her and rejecting her with no explanation every time she initiated, she, near tears, asked me what was wrong and why I didn't want her anymore. I wasn't fully ready to talk about this yet, so I just told her I haven't been in the mood. She didn't believe me and asked what she was doing wrong. I told her I needed some time to myself and she demanded to know why. Finally I caved and showed her the post. I left our bedroom and left her alone to read it. 20 minutes later she came out of the bedroom crying and tried to hold on to me. I pushed her off of me and she started crying harder. I let her calm down to the point where she could speak coherently. She told me that she didn't think I was awake when saying all of those things, and they were all exaggerated. Firstly, she said that she enjoyed being with me, and that when she said she didn't have to fake it very much. She also said that she sometimes had to fake it with her ex sometimes too. Next she clarified that his size wasn't as large as she claimed. She said that the ex was only 1.5 inches above my size and that there is no possible way that she'd be able to have intimacy with someone as large as she claimed, and she was willing to prove it. I told her I didn't believe her because I have no reason to believe she'll be truthful about any of that stuff anymore. She went silent. I then told her that I couldn't believe that she'd tell her friends about how much worse I am than her ex. She still was silent, crying. I told her how much it hurt to know that she wasn't even willing to try to help me be better for her. I told her how I felt so unloved now and disrespected, and how I'm unsure if I want to propose to her anymore. She apologized for everything again. She said that her being drunk is no excuse what she did and won't heal the pain she caused me, and she understands that I can't unhear what I heard. But I just had to trust her on this. I told her I'd listen to her at least. She again said she didn't fake it much with me and her ex's schlong wasn't that much bigger than mine, and that she only lied about that to one of her girlfriends. She said she was too afraid to hurt my feelings, so she never wanted to critique our intimacy. I asked why she cared more about the quality of intimacy with her ex, and she said she never really critiqued him either. She said that he didn't know what he was doing and just pressed her buttons correctly enough for her to have intense finishing. She said that she really didn't even guide him, so had no idea what he did, and she hasn't even been able to replicate what she felt from touching herself. She said that if I was willing to experiment with her, she thought we could figure it out. My last question for her was if she missed her ex. She said that intimacy with him was better, but more enjoyable with me because she felt more emotionally connected to me than him. I asked why she wanted to take him back, and she said that she was young and dumb and gave herself to people that didn't deserve her because she was afraid to be alone. She said that she found a great-looking guy that cherished her and gave a damn about her emotions and me. As of right now I'm still hurt greatly. Talking to her helped a lot, but it'll still take me time to be able to trust her like I did. I told her that I was going to need time, but at the end of the day I still loved her, and wanted to try to work through this. I agreed to buy a homeless woman and her daughter groceries but ended up ditching halfway through. I was at a train station because I had to pick up my sister from the airport. I was already really late. I had 20 minutes before catching the train to go to her, the next one would have been 2 hours later. While waiting, I was approached by a woman, about 30 years old, with her little daughter. She asked me to buy some groceries for her so that she and her daughter could eat. I tried to give her money instead, but she insisted I accompany her, so I agreed, but I explicitly told her that it couldn't take more than 15 minutes because of the train, and she accepted. I regretted it almost instantly, and she took a cart and basically started ransacking the supermarket. Her cart not only included normal groceries but pans, pots, glasses, several 4-packs of Red Bulls, a lot of junk food and so on. I wanted to do a good deed, but this was ridiculous. I roughly counted the expenses and after a good 10 minutes it was already almost at $200. The shop clerks were staring at me like I was a fool. I have heard of these scams before from friends, but I believe she really was in need. At the 13-minute count she was still taking her time with no end in sight. Stressed out at the thought of missing my train, having a public confrontation and being impolite to someone in difficulty, I just ran away. I could hear her calling out to me, but I ran like Usain anyway. I don't know whether I should have, but months later I still think and feel bad about it. Eating at a restaurant which was actually a mafia front. Years ago, I was going to see the Cleveland Philharmonic with my girlfriend and we were looking for a place to eat before the show. We felt like Italian food and found a place that looked really pretty outside, but didn't have windows. That should have been red flag number 1 to be honest. We went in and the place was absolutely deserted, but decorated to the rafters with old world charm. The sign said seat yourself, so we did. We noticed a few guys in suits coming in and going directly into the kitchen. Red flag number 2, we were, however, young and stupid and didn't think anything of it. One guy noticed us, stopped and stared for a minute, then went into the back. About 10 seconds later, this lovely old lady came bustling over to us and greeted us like family. There were no menus, but I'll make something you'll both love. We had, if I remember, something like 12 different courses of the best food I've ever eaten in a restaurant. Nobody else in the place except the two of us, this old lady, and presumably, the suited guys in the kitchen. When it came time to pay, she would not accept money, told us it was her pleasure and insisted that all she wanted was a hug and knowledge that we had a great meal. We went back a month later and the place was gone. I often wonder A, how I was that stupid, and B, whatever happened to that lovely old lady. Mafia or not, she made our evening both wonderful and memorable. What is the most common reason for you to turn down intimacy? Cluelessness or irritation at responses? I was talking to a dude for 4 days. I went so far as to call this man sexy yesterday. I really want to have intimacy. It's been 4 months and everything else in my life is horrible, so I could use some small amount of comfort. He said he was glad I thought he was sexy. Then followed 6 hours of silence, so I said sorry if that was too forward. Then this morning he texted me, "You're fine. Do you want to talk all the time? Do you want my phone number?" And I was just like, wow, I'm dragging a corpse cart here. This guy has the personality of a dildo and moves at half the speed of an inanimate object. Never mind. Another young man seemed okay but then thirsted his way into the creepy town. First he asked me to coffee to get to know each other, and that sounded good, but then I was sick. The next day he suggests we go to a movie and cuddle. How can we get to know each other in a movie? Also, I don't know you, so I don't want to touch you, and I'm still sick. Next he just tries to invite himself over to cuddle, still without trying to get to know me. F off. Can I suggest a middle ground of not assuming you get to touch someone just because they thought you looked cute in 3 pictures? But also, if you said you want FWB and you say you think someone is sexy and someone then says you're sexy, perhaps then assume they want your number or perhaps a coffee meetup at that point? Giving out your own phone number, unlike distributing unsolicited PP pictures at random, are not a violation of consent. One profile I saw recently was a profile featuring one picture of the underside of a man's chin, and the only content in the profile was him swearing he was off to kick his little sister's boyfriend's butt. I almost want to just take screenshots and point out why people get scared off or bored off by profiles/comments. Some dude asked me to peg him for money the other night too. Dating apps are a cesspool. Am I the a-hole for ending friendship with best friend because she's pregnant with a man I despise? My best friend and I have been close for a couple of years since we met at work. We did have a falling out over some workplace drama, but we managed to resolve it and became friends again. However, there's a major issue in her life, her boyfriend. He's honestly terrible in every possible way. He hardly works, and when he does, he spends his earnings on substances or stuff for his car. Their relationship is constantly strained due to his laziness and lack of contribution. He doesn't help with household chores, cooking, or taking care of their 2 dogs. It's distressing to witness how he mistreats the dogs, hitting them too. On top of that, he's nearing 30 and can't even clean up after himself when he creates a mess, which happens far too often. He leaves out food until it goes moldy, resulting in bug infestations. He consistently belittles her, repeatedly emphasizing how useless and awful of a girlfriend she is. I've tried countless times to make her understand that he isn't the right person for her and she should consider ending the relationship. It's painful to watch her suffer and cry because of him. Then, she dropped the bombshell, she's pregnant with his child. As if things weren't already challenging enough, she's ecstatic about the pregnancy because she has wanted a baby for years. I respect her desire to have a child, but the reality is that they can barely provide for themselves. They are constantly in overdraft and constantly borrowing money from friends, including me, just to scrape by. I've tried explaining to her that they might not be in the best position to bring a child into the world. Raising a child comes with significant financial burdens, and they're already struggling to make ends meet. I've done my best to be supportive, but it's difficult. I know that this child is going to drastically change her life. Personally, I have no desire to have children, and I cherish road trips, festivals, and dancing. Unfortunately, I anticipate that she won't be able to participate in these activities anymore since she'll have a child to care for. I'm not comfortable being around children all the time, and it's making me contemplate ending our friendship and blocking her. Am I the one in the wrong here? My boyfriend took his shirt off in front of me for the first time. My boyfriend and I have been together for 8 months and he has been hesitant to take his shirt off around me. He was assaulted by one of his uncles from the age of 9 until he was 13 years old, and the trauma he has is still there. He never took his shirt off as a kid and gets really uncomfortable when people touch him. He didn't let me hug him or hold his hand the first month we were together, and the first time he asked for a hug I nearly cried. He is the most handsome man in the world and has the biggest heart imaginable. I'm happy to be his girlfriend. He is really into fitness and goes to the gym almost every day. He started working out when he was 15 as a way for him to take back control of his body, and he really enjoys it. He struggles with anxiety and considers me and the gym his safe spaces. He has really nice body and works hard to maintain his physique. Last night he came to my apartment and was complaining about being sore. We were laying on my bed watching TV and he kept moving around and trying to get comfortable. He fell down some stairs 2 months ago and sprained his AC joint, and yesterday was the first time he has been able to work out that shoulder. He was really uncomfortable, so I asked him if I could rub and massage it for him. He shut the idea down, but I assured him that he was safe with me and I would not do anything to him he didn't want. He was still unsure but said he wanted to take this step with me. I offered to take my shirt off with him, and after a minute of reassurance he agreed. We took off our shirts and he looked so beautiful. He moved up in front of me and I began rubbing his shoulders. He flinched at first but relaxed and said it was helping. He asked me not to touch his lower back, so I stayed around his shoulders and neck. I massaged his shoulders for about a half hour and told him all the things I love about him, and he was so calm and relaxed. He spent the night, and when I woke up this morning he was in between my arms. We didn't go to sleep like that, so he must have moved next to me in the middle of the night. I started rubbing his back and he woke up and moved closer. It was our first time sharing a moment of intimacy and it was so beautiful. He left an hour later and sent me a text thanking me for treating him with love and respect. I did it. He trusts me with his body. I will love and respect him for as long as I live. You're a burglar, but instead of stealing things you do things to confuse or annoy your victims. What do? If the homeowner had a Christmas tree they store somewhere when it's not being used throughout the year, the fake ones, not legit trees, I'd get it out, put their decorations on and wrap it in lights. They'll then wake up in the middle of the night or the next morning to a Christmas tree, fully set up. It's June, why is the Christmas tree up? That will confuse them. They pack it away, still confused, and don't think about it again. That is until the next night. The next night, you get that damn tree out again, decorate it and put it somewhere else, but this time you place a single present under it. The present is to the homeowner with no name saying who it was from. Inside the box is absolutely nothing. This will continue for a few nights, adding a couple more empty presents each time, further confusing and frustrating them. Until the final night. The final night, there is but one present under the tree. The box is heavier than usual, so they don't throw it out. Aside from a brick used to give the box some weight, there is only a letter inside. The letter reads, "Come outside, your present is waiting." The homeowner walks outside and before their eyes is all their fucking Halloween decorations covering their house.
You can choose any superpower, but the first person to reply gets to choose a side effect. What power do you choose? Ability to control water. But whenever you do, your socks get wet. I can turn invisible when wanted. But it's useless since no one wants you. The ability to know the song that's stuck in the head of anyone I can see. But you have to listen to ads before you can hear what song it is. The ability to walk through walls. Every wall you walk through you will walk in on your parents having fun. I can breathe underwater. Only in carbonated water. Shape shift. But only into a jar of pickles, and you can't change back.
What is a messed up thing you did that still haunts you? In college I worked at a gas station, the night shift. It was a shift from about 2 in the afternoon to 11 p.m. We mostly catered to the drunkards of the college neighborhood, but we also got a crowd of olds from a retirement and assisted living place across the way. The regular olds would come in to buy lotto tickets or just get out of their apartment for a while. I loved these old men and women. I would let them yammer on as long as they liked about whatever. I enjoyed talking to them. One day, in the middle of summer, at the beginning of my shift, one of the regular old ladies comes in to get a scratch off or something and says she is going to go visit her son and his kids on Blah Street. I'm like, Mary, it's over 90 degrees out, that is at least a mile away, I can't let you walk all that way in the heat, you will stroke out. She is insistent she is going. So after back and forth on this forever I finally say, okay, Mary fine, but please let me drive you. We worked in paired shifts, me and my partner were cool, so I left him to cover the store to drive her. So I know where Blah Street is, but she is giving me all these wacky instructions to get there, really insistent. Finally, after 20 minutes of her not seeming to know where the hell we are going, I'm like, let me just drive to Blah Street and you can tell me what house. So we get there and finally she is like, that is my son's house. I'm relieved because I've been away from the store way too long. So she gets out and I throw the car in the reverse and I'm about to peel out and I have the wherewithal to hold it. Make sure she gets in the house. So this little old white lady goes up to the door, knocks, and a few minutes later, 2 little black kids answer the door. I think, crap, this is the wrong house, but the kids talk with her for literally 1 second and then let her in. So then I'm thinking, that was bad out of me, just because she's white doesn't mean her grandkids are. So I leave and don't think about it again. Until the next day. Apparently, those 2 kids were definitely not her grandkids. They just let her in because they were like, oh, it's a little old lady who seems to think she belongs here, come on in. Well, the kid's mom got home and kicked her out and she started walking home, totally lost. A kind construction worker found her confused, slightly dementia self and he was kind enough to call a cab to get her home. So thank God, I didn't kill her. You may wonder how I found these details out. See, she told me the next day during my shift when she brought me banana bread to thank me for driving her, or rather abandoning her in the middle of the damn city with no money and no direction in 90-degree heat. I couldn't even eat the banana bread because it made me sick. What an idiot I was. What is the worst thing that was said at your 10-year high school reunion? A few years ago a handful of my former classmates from a small town in Ontario, Canada got together for our 10-year reunion. I wasn't really looking forward to it. 10 years had been a rough road for many of us, including myself. I was really hoping we'd have a few beers and talk about the good old days, then go our separate ways. We, my wife and I, had lucked out though, and a few of the more successful group members arranged for us to stay in a newly built hotel right downtown. Even better, They managed to get us a separate room block so we didn't have to worry about awkward conversation in the elevator with other hotel guests. On Friday night we had appetizers and drinks in the hotel's restaurant/lounge before going across the street to the town hall where the reunion was being held. Our former classmates had all shown up and it was obvious most of them had done their fair share of pre-drinking. There was music playing, people were dancing, plenty of laughter and some tears of joy. And then he walked in. Guy walked into the middle of a Michael Jackson song, wearing a sequin jacket, button-up shirt and slacks that were filthy at the cuffs and ankles. He was obviously very intoxicated as he staggered to the center of the room, wailing and pointing at people. "I remember you. I remember you." A ton of people rushed over to catch the guy before he fell over completely. He was slurring and almost unintelligible. We learned later he'd been drinking since lunchtime. Someone had come to pick him up and drive him to the reunion, but instead dropped him off at his house and abandoned him there. Needless to say, the mood of the night changed quite considerably. A handful of us, including myself, helped get the poor guy to his feet and back to our table. He fell asleep immediately and continued to mumble something about wormholes, then fell quiet. I had another classmate keep an eye on the intoxicated guy while I went to collect the young lady who'd organized our group, and someone I'd always admired growing up. Settling down at our table, she asked, "So, how do you think it's going so far?" I said, "Well, so far it's been like the opening sequence in Back to the Future, except everyone's gotten intoxicated instead of old. Then the big kid showed up and ruined the party." She replied, "It's not his fault, you know. We should have been more involved." I told her I wasn't sure what she was referring to and she went on to explain that during high school our classmate had led a much more wealthy and privileged lifestyle than anyone else in our group. She said that while we were doing our best and struggling through crappy jobs and trying to make ends meet, he was being ferried around in a limousine and buying bottles of liquor we couldn't afford. Our classmates continued, telling me that whenever our group would go out for a meal after school, the big kid's parents would pick up the tab and invite a few people into their home for snacks and more booze. Some of us had gotten invited over to the big kid's house for parties as well, but had always been turned away at the door by an older, imposing man who we assumed was a hired bouncer. They continued on, telling me that had anyone from our group been given the opportunity to advance our education, we would never have known or cared that the high school lifestyle we were living had been paid for. We all agreed that it didn't matter anymore. Most of us had gone on to good jobs, families and a sense of self-worth that made us who we were. But then I saw the look on my wife's face and realized that she was thinking of our new baby at home. I gently grabbed her arm and walked with her over to the washrooms. She told me how embarrassed and uncomfortable she'd grown, how she'd been wondering what she and I had done wrong to be left behind while others were given a better fate. But more than anything she was angry. She said it felt incredibly unfair that we'd have to live the same tough lives our parents had, just because some circumstance had prevented us from being able to go to university. We talked for a while and I handed her a Kleenex when she started to cry. We went back to the table and I turned to our organizer friend, told her it was really late and that I was going to take my wife home. But before I could get my jacket back on, our organizer friend had tears streaming down her cheeks as well and gave me a big hug. All of the other group members circled around to say their goodbyes, offering hugs, handshakes and kind words. Once we were in the car and on the way home, my wife said that she felt the night had gone a little smoother than she'd expected. She asked what I'd said to our organizer friend, and when I told her what I'd done, it was the first time during the entire night where I saw my wife smile.
Everybody believes I'm dumb for breaking up with my boyfriend for nothing, but for me it is something. I need advice about the thing with men having female friends. I don't know. I could understand if it is a childhood friend, an old ex where love and attraction is long gone, on both parts, and only friendship is left, etc. But my boyfriend of 3 years, been living together for a month, suddenly became friends with a girl from work. I don't like it. It started with him telling me how happy he was that there's finally someone new at work that he clicked with. He told me who she is and they had a lot in common, etc. I didn't mind it at first. I was just happy he was having a good time at work. I started minding when I met her. She was hostile. She called me the lucky one and asked me if I felt threatened by younger women since I'm older. What? I'm literally 2 to 3 years older than her and 6 months older than my boyfriend. He laughed. I told him that I didn't like her and that I didn't want him to be closer to her. He has a lot of friends and he doesn't need her. He called me jealous and ridiculous. I said fine. I kept an eye on them and they started texting more and more frequently. We celebrated our anniversary last weekend and she knew it. She was texting the whole evening and he answered some of her texts. She asked him if he was having fun at our celebration and he said very much, so she texted, "If you're really having fun you wouldn't be texting me instead." I told him that was enough and that he should put his phone aside. I asked him if he thought what she wrote was okay. He said that she was only joking. That's her sense of humor. I should loosen up. I told him again that I didn't like her and even though I could be wrong he should respect my wishes and cut her off. He told me that I was controlling and insecure and that he isn't doing anything wrong, so I should respect and trust him. The evening was ruined. We fought. I thought to myself, maybe I was controlling and insecure and in that case he shouldn't be with someone like me. Or I could be right and he is letting someone step over my boundaries and then I shouldn't be with him. Either way we shouldn't be with each other. I took a personal day. Moved all my stuff from his apartment and went back to my old place that I shared with a friend. She was happy to have me back so she didn't need to find a new roomie. Everyone now from my boyfriend to our friends to our families think I'm overreacting. We could discuss and solve this, but I have tried, for many months, to make him understand that I was very uncomfortable. He texts me multiple times a day to come to my senses and to stop being childish. He loves me and she is just a friend. Funny that old me is the childish one, isn't it? With the age gap and all. Why does your partner find your body gross? We had another one of the talks again last night. I asked my husband why he wouldn't even fake a smile when he sees me unclothed. He was defensive and dismissive as usual. But I kept pressing, and for the first time he responded honestly. He told me that he can't feign excitement when he sees my unclothed body because he is shallow. I asked what he meant by that. He just kept repeating that he was too shallow to be excited by me, and then tentatively said that I don't look like the women in the corn he watches. He told me that I'm too chubby for him nowadays. He only told me this when I really pressed him to explain further. He's not attracted to my body. He never has been. I'm 137 pounds, 5'9". I've gained 10 pounds over the course of our 4-year relationship. I still have a waist and I have wide hips, so I've always been an hourglass. I've always known that I'm not his type even when I was underweight. Even when I was underweight he would tell me to eat less and exercise more. Due to him, I developed bulimia, and every time I threw up food he would applaud me and be happy with me. When I started recovering he was not happy and we had a huge argument over it, but eventually he gave in. He's my same height and was chubby when we met, but has gained 40 pounds over the course of our relationship and is now medically obese. I've loved him and desired him through these past years no matter his weight or shape. And he has the audacity to tell me with a straight face that it's impossible for him to feel a spark for me because I don't look like a corn star and am too chubby, even though I am of a perfectly normal weight. I stuttered out that I had only gained 10 pounds, that my doctor had congratulated me on the weight gain because it was needed. He said, "Well, 10 pounds is a lot for you. And you're not muscular, so it just made it worse than it already was." I had to put my hand over my mouth to keep from sobbing. I didn't want him to hear how his words had sucked the air from my lungs. I am absolutely shattered. Mortified. Ashamed of how much I pursued him. Embarrassed by the memories of all the times I tried to initiate and was rejected or ignored. The waves keep hitting me and suddenly I'm crying again, and again. I was severely underweight due to an eating disorder when I was at my worst with him, yet he encouraged this unhealthy state all the time, and wanted me to be rail thin, and for so many years I gave in. I feel broken.
I, 38, am in a new relationship, 51, and his texts are starting to concern me. My current boyfriend and I have been together since February and we've had a few arguments, but generally things are good. What I can't wrap my head around are some of the text messages that he sends me. They come out of nowhere and feel a little nuts to me. I don't know if I'm the one being a jerk here, but I don't know what to make of them. I've told him it puts me off, but he doesn't seem to hear me. This is an example of one he sent today after he video called at lunch. I answered, but he hung up and wouldn't answer when I called back. I left a message saying I guess he didn't have service and couldn't answer, but just call back if it's important. His reply was, "What would be the point in answering after seeing your dressed makeup on and hair done? That tells me you have been up for hours, and in that time I guarantee that your phone has been in your hand a lot and never once did you have the desire or want to call or text and say hello, good morning, I love you, or even F off for that matter. And that makes me feel like crap, to be real honest." So I didn't answer. 5 minutes later I got this, "And because you still have nothing to say, that just tells me I was right, this kind of thing is getting more frequent." I feel like it's kind of excessive, but he says it feels like I don't love him. I don't even know how to respond honestly. Doctors of Reddit, what's your thank God they came in for a second opinion story? I have a story of a friend who was severely mismanaged. For 2 years, my friend had been going to her GP complaining about migraines, bouts of severe vomiting, and dizzy spells. Every time, he would order blood work, then tell her she was fine. One morning, she woke up, and after a seductive night with her husband, could barely stand. She was so dizzy and had such a bad migraine. She told her husband not to worry, sent him to work and had her neighbor drive her to the emergency room. She doesn't remember arriving. When she got there, she started acting erratic. They had to sedate her, and sent her for a CT scan of her head. There, they noticed a huge mass in her brain. The hospital wasn't equipped to deal with that, so they sent her by ambulance to the nearest hospital that could, a 4-hour drive away. This hospital immediately sent her for an MRI. It wasn't a mass. They could actually see the mass growing as they did the MRI. No, she was having a massive stroke. She was immediately taken in for surgery. They put in a stent, and had to remove most of the left side of her brain as it was all dead. Afterwards, she was in a coma for nearly 72 hours. They were uncertain if she would wake up, and if she did, if she would ever recover. Thankfully, she did. It took almost a year of physio, and speech therapy, among a few others, but she has made almost a complete recovery. They even had their first child 8 months ago. Turns out, she had incredibly high cholesterol. With all the blood work that was done, her GP should have caught it. When she confronted him, he told her that her diagnosis was wrong, that she hadn't had a stroke and had made it up. She went after his license, and last I heard he was still running from the authorities.
I made my dad think he is losing his mind as revenge because he yelled at me for 2 years because of my ADHD. I have a father who is very strict about tidiness. He likes things to be placed in a very particular way. The thing is, I like to organize my room differently. When I was 14, I kept the books and files on my desk in a very particular way. It was organized based on usage and importance, as I have ADHD and that's just the easiest way for me to find things. Because of this, to the average eye, it looks a little bit like just a really tall pile of random stuff I put there to avoid looking at. To be fair, I had left it untouched for 4 months. But that's mostly cause the pile consisted of stuff I needed for my summer and winter job, so I only really used it during those times. That being said, my father didn't like that. So, one day when I was at school, he moved parts of my pile that he deemed as unimportant. Honestly, I didn't really notice for a while. But then one day, I decided that I'd scan some important files for my job so that I wouldn't lose them, only to find that the entire folder full of files had disappeared. I looked around and even looked at my brother and mother's desk, but it had completely vanished. I asked my dad cause he moves stuff a lot, but when I did he started to yell at me. He said that I never knew how to keep my things properly and that I was lazy, careless, forgetful, and unorganized. He called me delusional for thinking that someone else had moved it. He said that my having a job was a waste. I would never learn responsibility, because I couldn't even bother to be responsible for something important. He held the fact that I had lost that folder over my head for the next 2 years and would yell at me occasionally about it whenever I misplaced something. Then, one day, when he tasked the entire family to help find his important document, I found a small box placed behind 4 larger boxes in the storage area of my house. Peeking out of it was a sticker I made for the lost folder. When I opened it, there it was in all its glory. Finally, I had proof that he moved it. Because it was his storage behind boxes filled with his stuff. I was both relieved and livid. He called me delusional. Crazy. Irresponsible. He yelled at me about it for 2 years while I cried each time. After I showed him, he didn't even apologize. He said that I should have kept it better and if I did I wouldn't have lost it. Here's the petty revenge. Since that day, about 1 year ago, I had started moving little bits and pieces of his stuff. Not to obscure places, because then I would be found out immediately, but a 1 to 2 meter radius between where he actually put it. Put down his cup of water and then left to take a phone call. It'll move from his desk to the random portable shelf thing he put some of his stuff on top of. Put down his phone to go to the toilet? One side of the desk to the other. His vape? From the shelf to the pen holder, he had on his desk. His shirts. Yes, he puts them in order. I'd change the order of shirts which had the same color. I'd switch the old shoes at the bottom of his shoe rack every once in a while. He doesn't use them but he notices that something moved and tries to figure out what. Little things like that for an entire year. He would start yelling every time, claiming that he swore he knew that someone had taken his stuff. But why would someone take his stuff only to put it a meter away? He stopped yelling around 5 months in and started commenting on how he was getting old and starting to forget where he put stuff. But anyway, during this year where I hid things, I was diagnosed with ADHD, and my dad started to learn stuff about ADHD and realized that my piling thing was actually really common. He also started to notice the patterns in which I put my stuff and commented less on it, even when I knew he wanted to. He actually went to a session with my therapist to ask more questions. Turns out, most of the things he had issues with about me were all symptoms of my ADHD. It was also during this year that we realized that we were both mature enough to have a sit-down conversation about things like adults, and or almost adults. We worked things out between us and promised to not drive each other crazy on purpose. So after an entire year of moving his stuff, I confessed to him that he wasn't developing sudden short-term memory loss, he just had a very petty daughter. He said he figured it out a month before I told him because he started to notice that when our relationship as father and daughter got better, his memory would get better too. Oh well.
My unemployed poly girlfriend has been using my credit cards on dates with other people. For some context, I've been with my partner for 7 years. Recently we decided to try polyamory. It's been going very well for me and she's been supportive. It might not work for other couples, but it's been going smoothly for us, until now. She's on a weekend-long date now with a guy that lives out of town that she met online. It's her first date since we had the talk, and I'm super excited for her. I personally have had a few different partners since we opened up the relationship, and at first I was happy she was finally getting to explore being polyamorous in her own life. I hope she has an amazing time, truly, but I didn't expect all of this. There's one thing that is irking me though, but I'm not sure if I'm overreacting and should just brush it off. My partner hasn't worked in over 3 years. I've encouraged her to get a job, but for a combination of reasons, some valid, most not, she hasn't. I pay all of our expenses and for her daily expenses she uses one of my credit cards. Maybe I should have seen this coming after letting her get so used to this financial dynamic. I just didn't think much of it because I do make pretty good money and I could afford to support the both of us. Here's the problem, while she's been out on the date I'm getting notifications of her paying for things on the date for the two of them with my credit card. My first reaction is that this feels super ick to me. I'm happy for her to go and have a great time and hopefully end up with something amazing, but it also doesn't feel right that I'm paying for amusement park tickets for the two of them. Am I in the wrong? Am I engaging in toxic masculinity? Do I just not understand polydynamics where one person isn't working?
What did a kid in your school do to get expelled? Dude smuggled a wine bottle. How the teachers found out. Well, the brass knuckles he was carrying in the backpack broke the bottle and spilled wine in the middle of the classroom. I live in a ruralish Irish town and our school was built next to a massive wheat farm. One day a kid bought in a plastic bottle filled with petrol and matches. He hopped over the fence at lunchtime and set the field on fire, destroyed the farmer's entire plot. Apparently it was about 500k worth of crops. He also served time. Was pretty wild. One of the special ed kids kept escaping the school, allegedly through a bathroom window, would strip down and try to play in traffic in front of the building. He stole an autistic kid's backpack full of books, took a shit in it, zipped it shut, and shook it up. He then bragged about it to one of his friends, so when autistic kid had his freak out it didn't take long for administration to figure out who done it.
I left my friend's house while she was drunk. I was at my friend's house, we will call her Danny, for a Friday the 13th party. I was aware there were going to be some drinks there, and I was prepared to be the one to take care of the other drunken teenagers. As I was going to be driving myself home the next day, I was sleeping over at her house. My boyfriend was there, and he's a very anti-drug/alcohol person. And I, too, am not much of an alcohol user due to trauma from alcohol abuse from my father. But Danny's mother would let a few of the other friends there have some shots that were provided. The night was going well, and we enjoyed speaking to the adults. Once my boyfriend left, only me and our other friend, 15, Jay, were the only sober people in the house. Let's just say Danny isn't the best drunk to be around. Danny had invited a boy to the party, 17, who seemed okay until later in the evening. This boy shook hands with everyone and said hi other than to our friend Jay, who is African American. To which Jay brought up to me. We brushed it off and tried to move on. Later in the night, Danny had gotten absolutely wasted and couldn't hold in all her feelings. I was prepared for that as I had cared for her at a previous party she had been drinking at. Throughout this breakdown, she had let out some things about the boy she invited, such as him being the father of a 2-year-old girl and having 4 strikes for a DUI in one state and 3 in another. A couple years prior, Danny had lost her father in a motorcycle accident where the driver was drunk and hit him, killing him immediately. Danny has been struggling with her father's death ever since. While Danny was drunk, she had let out this information about this guy and continued to make excuses for his actions, saying he was a good guy and only drank to cope with his depression. I snapped after trying to keep calm and help her and yelled, "He may be a good guy, but he is not fit for being a father, and he is clearly not a good guy if he feels it's okay to drink and drive and put people in danger," to which she responded with, "I told him I'd never get into the car with him if he had been drinking." I couldn't hold in my anger and yelled, "It's not just the people in the car, Danny. It's the other people on the road. It's people like him that led to your father's death." She just cried harder. At that moment, I just left the room and I ran upstairs to pack up my things. Jay had followed me, attempted to calm me down, and helped me grab my things. He looked at me and told me to drive safely as he helped me put my stuff in the car. I left and didn't tell Danny, which led her to have a panic attack. I got something there, so I returned and grabbed what I had left. People were telling me she needed me and panicked that I had left. I went upstairs and saw her crying, and I just hugged her and told her I loved her, and I left. I came home to my father drunk and passed out on the floor. What's your craziest airplane story? I am an extremely light sleeper. I'm talking if you whisper in a room I am sleeping in, I'll wake up levels of light sleeper. Ever since I moved in with my boyfriend 1 year ago, I haven't gotten a single night of uninterrupted sleep. I'm usually okay with this because this is just a part of being human for me, but things got crazy this year when my boyfriend took me on our anniversary vacation, to Prague. I was super excited to go but, lo and behold, our flight got cancelled at the very last second, so my boyfriend and I had to wait for the next one. Unfortunately, the next one was at 3 in the morning. Due to the constant noise and disruptions in an airport, I wasn't able to get a wink of sleep. When I boarded the airplane, I was ready to curl up against my boyfriend and knock out. Unfortunately, due to us getting added to the flight at the last minute, we were separated. My boyfriend was in the middle of the plane while I was towards the front. He gave me that seat because it was a window seat, but holy poop, I have never been more miserable in my life. There was this a-hole kid behind me who would not stop kicking my seat no matter what I said to him or his parents. Then, the guy next to me chose this 9-hour flight to break up with his girlfriend, and she proceeded to bawl her eyes out until she had literally cried herself to sleep. And finally, the plane was all out of vegetarian options, so I couldn't even eat anything to feel better. At this point I was starting to look genuinely awful due to the lack of sleep. My boyfriend and I met up outside the bathroom just for a quick pick-me-up, but when he saw me, he told me to wait. Apparently, my boyfriend was seated next to this nice lady. He had told her about my sleep issues and she said that she had some Elevate sleep strips which might help me out. So, my boyfriend went back to the lady, picked up the sleep strips which were literally called insomnia killers, and gave them to me. I took the sleep strip super quick and was even planning on asking my boyfriend to try to get a second strip so the effect would be stronger, but poop, I didn't even have time to ask. Within minutes I was knocked out in my window seat, now somehow ignoring the kid who was kicking my seat and the ex-couple who were supposedly arguing about who would get to keep the dog. It actually ended up being one of the most restful sleeps of my life. When I woke up hours later in Prague, I felt like I'd woken up out of my childhood bedroom. And the craziest part was that those Elevate strips had got me to sleep without waking up. On a freaking airplane. I never thought that using one strip would change my travel experience completely, but now I just feel bad for everyone who flies without them. That poop changed my life. The combination of a sleep aid, the white noise of a plane, and the pressure change are all heavenly if you manage to fall asleep before the babies start screaming. I ended up ordering a pack of Elevate sleep strips from Prague to help with my nightly routine, and it's been helping loads. And by the way, my boyfriend ended up using the vacation to propose to me, though I did not sleep that night, if you know what I mean. My teacher was wrong and I rub it in his face every day. So I was bullied in school. One of my tormentors wore a COS headset. One day I had enough and kicked, more like shoved with my foot, him in the stomach. As my foot came down I snagged the cord and ripped it out of one side of the headset. Now anyone who has owned one of those POS headsets knows that they aren't very complicated. He goes crying to our teacher, and he hears me out and tells me he's going to call my mom and demand we buy my bully a new one. My grandfather was really good with his hands, and I knew he could solder that wire back in place in no time. I told my teacher as much, but he angrily insisted that they were broken beyond repair, and not to question him since he was a teacher and I was just a stupid kid who didn't know anything about electronics. I said fine, we'll replace it, but only if I got the broken headset. He got this smug superior look on his face and told me that was fine, and good luck with that. My mom did not give me poop about it when I came home, God bless that woman, and picked up a brand new pair. I then went to my grandfather, who fixed it in 15 minutes. The next day I walk into school with my refurbished headset blaring an audiobook, yes I was and is that kind of guy, and hand my bully the new headset. He's pissed that I fixed the headset and wants it back. I tell him to pound sand. He goes crying to teacher again, and I'm waiting with a huge poop-eating grin on my face. Teacher comes chugging around the corner with a bully in his wake. I smile wider. The bully starts whining and demanding he gets the old headset back. Teacher gets red in the face, and tells the bully that he can't have both. Bully throws a tantrum to no avail. Bully stomps away. I walk up to my teacher and say my granddad fixed it in 15 minutes. It seems you aren't half as smart as you think you are. For the rest of my time at that school I took that headset out of my bag every time my class with. That teacher ended and put it on while looking my teacher right in the eyes, smirking like only a vindictive teenager can. I ensured a toxic work environment for that smug Fouquet. My bully, you ask? He escalated his torment after that and eventually he got kicked out. All in all that worked out pretty well for me. My lying wife had a multiple-year-long affair and the lawyer told me I would lose everything if I divorced her. So I spent years perfecting my payback. My revenge began by discovering my wife Carrie's infidelity after 14 years of marriage and 3 kids. I saw a text appear on her work phone for just a few seconds that would forever change my life. It was a message that was actually graphic and had no business being on anyone's work phone. It was on the lock screen and the sender's name, Perry, was visible. The world stopped around me. I just froze. My first thoughts were what the hell was that about? It's her work phone. That kind of message gets people fired. Then it hit me. Was Carrie having an affair? It's amazing how the brain works. I suddenly started remembering a lot of things Carrie had done that seemed odd but I'd either dismissed them myself or immediately accepted her explanation. She was always walking out of the room to answer a call or return a text and claimed that it would violate HIPAA. She was a nurse, if I overheard her talking about a patient. I accepted this because education has similar privacy laws regarding students. I'm a district school admin. She would sometimes come home with a faint smell of cologne on her clothes and claimed it was from helping to move male patients. Again I accepted this at face value, but it always struck me as odd how it seemed to have the same scent of cologne. Once the proverbial barn door was open, I started seeing a lot of things that I'd missed before. Our love life in the bedroom had cooled off considerably, which wasn't helped by her having to leave the house at odd hours to fill in for other nurses that called in sick. I also recalled where I'd seen the name Perry before and a call to the hospital confirmed he was a doctor there. For the next week or so, I was walking around in daze trying to put all of the pieces together. One of our kids had left a book in Carrie's car, so it was an excuse to visit the hospital. My kid went up to get Carrie's car key. I talked to a nurse in the lobby and joked about how work phones seem like a blessing but all they do is put you on call 24 hours a day. This led to her eventually telling me that the hospital was too cheap to give cell phones to nurses, so only high-level executives got them, which didn't include Carrie. With pretty much everything confirmed, I took some personal time off the next day to talk to a divorce lawyer. The news she gave me was horrible. We lived in a community property state with no-fault divorce. I made more money than Carrie, she'd been the primary caretaker of the kids, and we'd been married for more than 10 years. Basically, if I filed for divorce, I'd be screwed. Lose the house, pay alimony, she'd get a huge chunk of my retirement, and I'd pay child support for the next decade unless I was lucky enough to be awarded joint custody. The worst thing she told me was that it didn't matter that she cheated. It didn't matter. I was crushed. There was only one person I could trust with this kind of information. She was a fellow teacher that had also made the jump to administration, but was stuck at a school site. Let's call her Anne. Anne had been married at 19, but her marriage was annulled when her husband got some other woman pregnant. Since then, she'd focused on her career and we'd found we were kindred spirits in a lot of ways regarding K-12 education. I talked to Anne. She said something to me that changed my whole mindset. If you don't like the hand you're dealt, change the deck. I realized I had 2 problems. I made more money than Carrie and she had more time than me to be the primary caretaker of the kids. The second issue was actually kind of easy. At every district office, there are jobs that are fast tracks to higher positions and there are jobs that administrators suffer through. One of these dead-end regulatory positions was open again. I sat down with our district superintendent and asked about being transferred to that position. At first he was shocked, but I told him that it was my time to take one for the team and it would fill a hole in my admin experience. He agreed. It was really just crunching numbers with no personnel or student interaction so I could set my schedule, even take a laptop home and work there. With my new free time, I began taking the kids to school, picking them up from school, and taking them home. I'd help them with their homework, make dinner, etc. while the end goal was to become their primary caretaker. I can't explain how much I really enjoyed taking a more active role in their day-to-day lives. My salary hadn't been reduced, so I needed to find a way for Carrie to make a lot more money than she was in current nursing position. I remembered Carrie being mad that her supervisor told her in the future, bachelor degrees will be worthless and everyone will need at least a master's degree. Carrie had worked hard to get her bachelor's and that supervisor's comment peed all over her hard work. I talked her into starting a master's program. I told her that since I had a much more flexible work schedule, I would keep taking care of the kids. She was reluctant at first, then I said, you could have every evening free to study or go to class, whatever you want to do. I saw her eyes immediately light up, probably thinking that she could spend more time with Perry. To make sure she was actually completing her master's courses, I paid her tuition and fees directly to her university. It was going to take her between 2 and 3 years to finish. Those years were rough at times. I could tell every time she was rushing off or coming back from seeing Perry. There was an excitement or sense of satisfaction in her eyes that just wasn't there when she was doing her coursework. I had to either smile or pretend I didn't notice. My temper got short at times and I found myself in arguments over petty nonsense. A couple of times I almost blew the whole charade, having to bite my tongue and apologize rather than scream insults at her that she deserved. Anne remained my confidant through all of this. I'd recommended her for my previous fast-track position and she joined me at the district office. Anne was qualified, hard-working, ambitious and only needed her foot in the door to impress the higher-ups. I even got a few pats on the back for recommending her after she impressed everyone. Anne and I started our own affair. It wasn't some hot-blooded, passionate romance, but two friends giving each other what they need. Without Anne, I wouldn't have been able to maintain the charade of being the oblivious cuckold. But when Carrie would come home smiling after spending time with Perry, I was able to bear it, smiling back because I had my own lover. After 3.5 years, Carrie completed her master's and was promoted at her hospital. Her salary went up substantially and was now higher than mine. When the kids and I made her a congratulations dinner, I made a joke about her being the breadwinner for the family and she laughed, joking back I should be a stay-at-home dad now. A month later, I went back to the lawyer and told her the financial situation had drastically changed. With these new facts, she drafted the petition and filed it. When the kids were with my mother, I had Carrie served. The deputy knocked on our front door and I let him in, pointing at my wife. He asked her name and then handed her a copy of the divorce petition. With the deputy standing there, I told Carrie I knew all about her affair with Perry. I told her to go be happy with her Dr. Lover. She screamed at me, tried to lie, and then made the mistake of rushing toward me. The deputy stopped her and warned her that women go to jail for domestic violence too. He suggested she pack a bag to stay somewhere else. Carrie left after I promised not to tell the kids about her affair. I didn't tell the kids. But I told my mother, who told my sister, who told her kids, who told their cousins, my kids. It took a few days, but eventually the kids knew that Dad was divorcing Mom because she had a boyfriend. In the end, the court granted the divorce, giving me primary custody of our kids. Because I was already their primary caretaker, I kept the house with the promise I'd refinance to buy out Carrie's half. She was ordered to pay child support, and I used that fact to negotiate with her to give up any rights to my retirement if I bought her out. I was able to refinance my home, and with a little money borrowed from my parents, I bought our Carrie's community property interest in the home and in my retirement. The day she signed all the paperwork with my lawyer finally ending any possible financial obligations to her was the happiest I'd been. I felt like I could finally breathe. I celebrated with Anne, who'd been my rock through all of it. I'm not ashamed to say that through the years I'd cried many times in her arms. Anne and I would eventually marry. She got promoted to a higher position and I was convinced to take back my previous position at the district when my youngest child reached high school. Carrie and I got along well after the divorce. We took the kids to family therapy and worked out this co-parenting thing. For a few months, she took a beating from the kids about why she needed a boyfriend when Daddy was there all along. Between the kids and the therapist raking her over the coals, I didn't have to say anything at all. Carrie missed a lot of time with the kids because of her now legitimately busy work schedule, and I actually felt bad that my kids were missing time with their mother, so encouraged them to talk to her on the phone instead. When Carrie found out that I'd proposed to Anne, she congratulated me. I told her it's okay for her to marry Perry too. She got sad. She told me that Perry had started seeing another woman, a younger nurse at the hospital, because with her new position, she didn't have time for him, and when they did get together, she wasn't fun anymore. My ex-wife, the woman who'd cheated on me and destroyed our marriage, was looking to me for sympathy. I had none to give. What I had was years of anger and frustration. Years of knowing some other man was sleeping with my wife. I'd lost weight from not being able to eat, I'd suffered hypertension and had to confide in my doctor why it wasn't the stress of my job. I had to listen to my dentist complain about how I was grinding and listening to him tell me I'd need dental implants if it kept up. There were times when I had to be intimate with Carrie to keep up the charade, only to lie that I wanted to use rubbers to remind us how we used to have intimacy when we were dating, or because I might have a bladder infection, then go take a test anyway and wait for the results before seeing Anne again. But in the end, it was all worth it. I stole my best friend's acting career. My 20F friend, 20F, is an aspiring actress. Over the last year all of her auditions were online, however things have started picking up lately. Last week she had an in-person audition and I went with her. We had plans that day, so it was more convenient to tag along and hang out after. She was excited because this was a big company and it would give her a lot of exposure, good pay, etc. I was waiting for her outside when someone from the casting team came out and started chatting with me. They asked what I'm here for and if I'm interested in auditioning for an exciting role, my friends. At first I was reluctant because I'm not into acting, so I had no interest. However, the person managed to convince me and promised great pay. So I said yes, but not because I genuinely believed I'd get the role. I just thought it would be a funny story to tell my friend. The audition itself was easy and they were all super nice. I left and had no expectations I'd get the role. I mean, I don't have a portfolio and my only acting experience was in a school production many years ago. I didn't try to hype up my experiences and was very honest. When I told my friend about it, she jokingly said that I'm now her competition, so she has to watch out. Merely a couple of hours after we left, I received a call from the same guy with an offer. I was in shock and asked if he got the correct number. My friend was with me and she was in even bigger shock. I honestly thought he miscalled me and wanted to speak to her because it seemed so ridiculous. She has far more acting experience and seemed confident about her audition. She got extremely angry and said that I purposely sabotaged her chances and that I'm not even interested in an acting career since I'm in STEM. She accused me of being a fake friend and evil. She was so pissed that she asked me to drop her off at the nearest bus stop so she could go home. We had a huge argument the next day and she said some pretty effed up things. She claimed that I was only hired because of forced diversity, I'm multiracial, she's white, and that this type of preferential treatment is unfair to actors. She even said that I obviously did something with the guy to get the role, which, I haven't. So now my friends are split. Some are saying that I'm in a shoal for auditioning and lessening her chances of success. They said that this gig obviously meant a lot to her and that I should have been supportive instead of derailing her career. Others are saying that I'm not in a shoal whatsoever because I just did it for fun and had no serious expectations or ill intent. They said that it's ultimately up to the casting people to decide who they want and that I might have left a better impression. I rejected the offer. So, am I in a shoal for what I did? Update: I don't really care about my girlfriend's mom. My girlfriend and I are fine. We talked about it and agreed since it is my house, I would be the one to grow a pair and say no. Her mom came up to visit, probably to scout out the house she thought she would be living in, and I laid it all out for her over dinner. After sitting down and having some small talk, I essentially said that under no circumstances would she be moving in with us, and that was that. She got pretty agitated, trying to guilt me with what's the big deal? Where will I go? I'll be on the street if you don't let me move in. I started to reiterate that it's not our problem, but I suggested public housing, some local assistance programs like food pantries, etc. She still wasn't having it though. She's very entitled. She said it would be a lot easier, for her, of course. These people only think of themselves, if we just let her move in. She didn't want to go through the hassle of applying for public housing. She doesn't want to have to go to the food banks, stuff like that. We kind of went back and forth, talking over each other, and it escalated to the point that I kicked her out. Didn't lay any hands on her, but I took her plate of food and threw it out, and told her to get the hell out of my house. She left, after some yelling, and my new neighbors saw the whole show of her cursing me out and peeling out of my driveway, chewing up some of my yard during the process. So that was fun. When the yelling started, my girlfriend retreated to our bedroom, and after her mother left I went back in to find her crying. After giving her some time and cleaning up dinner, I didn't so much throw her mom's plate out as I did launch it at the trash can, so it was everywhere. I went back in and we had a long talk about what happened. She told me I did the right thing, but I had scared her with all the yelling. She has a lot of childhood trauma, unsurprisingly, but I reassured her that her mom wouldn't be coming back, and this whole thing was over. So far, that's rung true. I suggested she give therapy a shot since her family is such a mess and she has a lot of baggage she could talk out, and she agreed, only asking if I would attend some sessions with her, which I happily agreed to. She's been to 3 sessions so far alone, and a 4th one with both of us, and from what I've heard they've been going very well. Got a girlfriend and my gay best friend stopped talking to me. I'm a bisexual guy and my friend Steve, whom I've known for 10 plus years, is gay. We come from conservative families, so we didn't even know the concept of queerness when we were young. Steve and I were inseparable throughout our teenage years and people joke that we were like brothers. We managed to get into the same college and moved to a big city when we were 17 years old. This exposed us to a completely different world and Steve realized that he was gay. I realized that I too was attracted to men. Not knowing anything about the queer stuff, I thought I was gay too. Steve and I found other queer people and our new friend circle was made of gay people. We couldn't tell our families that we were queer, so Steve and I could only depend on each other. We started dating men, but our initial relationships weren't very serious. After my first gay relationship ended, I realized that I was attracted to both men and women. I was bisexual. I told this to my group of queer friends, who said that I was going through a phase, that years of brainwashing was the reason I was attracted to women, that I would get over it, and they told me that I was gay. Steve refused to accept that I was bisexual and told me that bisexuality wasn't real. I tried to convince him, but he refused to accept that I wasn't gay. We were roommates and this started causing a lot of tension between us. I decided to let it go and stop trying to convince him. Things went back to normal and I had 2 more gay relationships. Steve got into a serious relationship with a senior. Our families didn't know anything about this. Then I met my current girlfriend Mary at a bar. Mary and I hit off immediately. We exchanged numbers and kept talking for a week before I invited her to our flat. I introduced her to Steve, and Mary and I went into my room. When she was leaving, I noticed that Steve was glaring at her. I didn't think much about this. Mary and I started meeting more often and Steve refused to talk to her. I decided to ask him about it and he told me that Mary was not good for me and asked me why I was being so close to a woman. I asked him what he meant by that and he just stormed off. Steve started fighting me about trivial things that didn't matter before. Mary and I made our relationship official a few weeks later and I posted about on my story. When I got back to our flat, Steve and a few friends were waiting for me. Steve started shouting at me, asking how I could betray him. He told me that I turned my back on him and he called Mary a witch. I reminded him that I was bisexual and assured him that I wasn't leaving him. Our friends took Steve's side and asked me why I started dating a woman. They agreed with Steve that Mary bewitched me. I left our flat and when I came back later, Steve refused to talk to me, and told me that he wouldn't talk to me as long as I was in a relationship with Mary. I hoped that this would blow over, but Steve refuses to talk to me a month later. I really like Mary and I don't want to end our relationship, but Steve needs my support and nobody back home knows anything about us being queer. We would most probably be disowned if they found out. How do I handle this situation? Update: after I posted on Reddit, I decided to tell Mary about Steve not talking to me. She was extremely supportive and told me that she'd support me in anything I decided to do. Some people asked if Mary knew about my gay relationships. I told her about my earlier relationships and me being bisexual in our first date and she was okay with it. I did not know biphobia was a thing until the comments told me about it yesterday. I assumed that everyone in the LGBT community supported each other, and I thought I was doing something wrong. As many people suggested, I decided to cut off my toxic friend circle and I won't be talking to them in the future. A comment about the relationship between Steve and I being codependent made me rethink our friendship. I realized that we were depending on each other too much. We were the only connection to home left for each other and this made us way too dependent on each other. I felt like we needed space from each other. I decided to move out and when I told Steve about this, he started crying and begged me not to leave. He said he would talk to me and that he would tolerate Mary. I told him that we were being codependent and he wouldn't need to tolerate me if he didn't like my choices. I told him that I would be there for him when he decides to come out and that he could always count on my support. Steve kept crying but I told him my decision was final. I went back to my room, called Mary and started crying. I did not want to leave my friend alone. She listened to what I had to say and reassured me. I had to look for a new place to live but Mary called me a few hours later and told me that one of her friends has a room and that I could move in with him. I thanked her for her help. Steve's friends started calling and yelling at me for abandoning them for a girl. They accused me of being a bad friend and accused Mary of breaking up our friendship. When I called Mary later, she told me that my friends were calling her and shouting at her for breaking up my friendships. I apologized but she was very understanding and told me that she would be there for me if I needed her. Hearing her say that made me feel better. I'm moving out, putting some distance between Steve and I and blocking my earlier friends. This ordeal has made me understand that I made the right decision by sticking with Mary and I appreciate her way more now. A lot of you mentioned that Steve might have feelings for me. I've only ever thought of him as a friend and I might have given it a shot before, but now I'm afraid of a romantic relationship with him. Thank you to all the people who gave me advice and helped me decide.
As soon as my boyfriend found out how much money I have, he's been planning lavish ways to spend it, and now I'm questioning his intentions. I take female want to make it clear that I've always spent money on my boyfriend, take male buying him nice things and whatnot. He got his PS5 a new gaming PC because of me. My boyfriend, however, found out that I have a good amount of money and has started to be quite weird about it. Several times he's referred to my money as our money and using our money to buy him the luxury car he's dreamt of having. He wants us to move out of separate apartments and get a house together and has said instead of getting him a small Christmas gift, that I should fund a trip for him to see Europe. I'm from Italy and have family in Bulgaria, Croatia and the Netherlands, and he's from Canada buying the luxury car. It's less whether I can afford it and more. That seems like something you get your husband or wife and not your boyfriend of 3 years. The house, I can understand if we were engaged or something, but we aren't. He has talked about marriage several times in the past few months. And finally, yes, I can afford a trip for both of us to tour Europe, but whereas it's something I might have thought of for us to do before, he only brought this up after finding out that I do have the money to pay for it. Is this reason enough to break up with him? Update 12 days later. So I didn't automatically dump my boyfriend. I decided I'd have a talk with him. I told him that it was basically really damn inappropriate to find out I have money and start making demands. I told him I have no problem using my finances for our relationship, but that he shouldn't automatically expect that I'm going to put out money on very expensive things for him. Just because he seemed very ashamed and agreed that it was a really crappy thing to do and he got carried away and a bit too excited. I told him I understood, but to do that was very disrespectful to me, and the time we've shared together because it made me feel like all of a sudden my money is what mattered. For a little while, it seemed that all was well. Then the other day, we were having a minor argument over something that turned into a bigger argument, and he said something along the lines of, "Well, you don't even want to use what you have for us, so maybe you've never cared about me." He got really quiet as though he knew that was a crappy thing to say, and we didn't talk until 2 days later. I was really angry. I was going to talk things through with him. However, this came the relationship fatality. He told the couple people were good with despite me asking him to keep the money quiet, that I was really rich and could afford tons of crap. How did I find out? Saturday we all went drinking together. He gets a bit too much in his system and orders an expensive bottle of wine. One of our friends was like, "Who orders that crap? We're good with our beers, and that's too expensive." Our other friend piped up and was like, "No, it's good. Me is really rich. She can pick up our tab tonight." Cue several other people who I've never told about my family's money, suddenly grilling me on why I never trusted them enough to tell them about my money. And oh, I thought we were friends and those kind of things. I broke up with him the next day. He's been blowing up my phone all day, but screw him. I could have moved past what he said the other day when we were arguing, but to tell people, I specifically asked him not to. Something I trusted him so much with. Yeah, I've lost a 3-year relationship and am probably going to lose a few friends as well.
Not telling the nurse at my niece's school about my profession. I, 29, was supposed to pick up my niece Sophie, 7, from elementary school and spend a day with her. It was all mentioned before to the school and I've picked her up a few times before. Sophie was running towards me, but unfortunately she tripped and fell down. Her knee was bruised and she started crying like crazy. I took her to the nurse's office immediately. The nurse was in her early 20s and helped Sophie with cleaning up her wound and dressing. I told my niece a lot about my line of work, so she asked if she was going to need stitches. If so, how many and what kind, etc. The nurse was impressed. She showed Sophie a few items of equipment she had and asked if Sophie wanted to be a nurse like her. Sophie said no, she wanted to be a doctor like her aunt, aka me. The nurse got a bit upset and asked me why I didn't say anything about this. I was honestly confused. I was like, why would I need to even mention it? I even threw in a compliment saying she was quite good at her job and I enjoyed witnessing a professional at work. She said I was being too generous with my comments. I told her I was being honest and thanked her for taking care of Sophie's knee. Right when Sophie and I were leaving, she said she'd never be able to guess my line of work correctly because I look better than most of my colleagues. I thanked her again and said I appreciated her help. She said I still owed her for not telling her my job and that it felt like I was testing her or deliberately trying to see how she was doing. I apologized and said that was not what I meant and that I knew she was more than capable of doing her job well. She said maybe I could find a way to make it up to her properly and I was like sure, but Sophie and I need to go now. I don't know if I was rude, but this had me thinking, should I have told her about my job? Small update, I gave the nurse a bouquet of flowers the next time I saw her. What is the craziest thing you have done in the hopes of getting laid? I was at a club with some buddies and my new girlfriend. She wanted to leave and asked if I'd walk her home. This was unexpected. Our original plan was for my buddies to crash at my place. Thinking I was getting the hint, I agreed. So I gave my house keys to my friends and said I'd catch up to them tomorrow. So I walked my girlfriend home, through around minus 20 degrees Celsius Canadian winter weather. She didn't have a proper coat, so I gave her mine like a gentleman. I bought us some Tim's hot chocolate along the way too, even though I was quite broke. She wanted to stop and chat on the bridge, apparently not feeling the cold as much as I was. I was a trooper though and suffered through it. She wanted to hash out whether we were calling each other boyfriend and girlfriend yet. Minus 20 in the direct wind cutting through the river valley while half cut was the logical place to do this. We got to her place at the university residence after an hour or so of walking. She kissed me, said good night and quickly walked through the front door, leaving me locked out. She still had my coat. I realized then that I had misread the situation. She never intended on inviting me in. My phone battery was nearly dead, so I turned it off in case I needed it. I was pretty poor at the time and taxis were expensive, so I decided to walk home, which was back on the other side of town another 5 kilometers away. Part of the river valley juts south a ways at one point. Rather than go around to the bridge, I decided to cut through the valley on the walking path at the bottom. I started down the path and hit a patch of ice and slid slowly all the way to the bottom on my back. I was still quite drunk, so I just laid there a bit as I realized that I may not be able to get up the path on the other side in this state. Plus it's pitch black in the valley and nobody will find me down there for hours. I spent the next hour meandering up the far side of the valley and finishing the walk home, stopping to relocate a road construction sign to a different street. Priorities after all. It's 5 a.m. when I get home and I don't have my key. I knock and yell but can't get my friends to wake up. I pull out my phone to call them and drop it on the step, smashing the screen, big otter case on it, got so cold that it snapped too. Finally, after more knocking, someone finally answers the door. My buddy looks me up and down and bursts out laughing. Was pretty emotionally scarred after that, didn't end up talking to that girl again and instead started hitting the gym and ended up effing her best friend to complete my personal revenge.
Am I the a-hole for embarrassing my boyfriend by dancing at a wedding? I have a strong feeling that I'm not in the wrong, but I could use some reassurance that I'm not the embarrassing idiot my boyfriend insists that I am. My boyfriend and I have been together for about a year. When we first started dating he was super kind, but as our relationship has gone on I only see more and more red flags in him. Whenever he has a bad day at work or something upsets him, he takes his anger out on me, and he's very quick to snap at me or say hurtful things then apologize later. Anyway, this all happened over the past weekend and I think it's the final straw for me when it comes to this crappy relationship. I have been at my job for about 6 years now, and I have become best friends with my one coworker that I see every day. Even though we met at work, we developed a strong friendship and we constantly hang out together outside of work. I was overjoyed when she told me she was getting married and I had been looking forward to her wedding for months. When the day came, the morning already started out stressful since my boyfriend couldn't find his dress shoes and kept insisting that I must have hid them or moved him. I was annoyed. Why the hell would I have hidden his shoes? By the time we left the house he was already in a bad mood and being short with me. When we first got the wedding, it was still cocktail hour and I mingled with a couple other guests. I'm not a big drinker but my boyfriend is, and he immediately started drinking heavily as soon as we got there. It wasn't until the reception that things started to go downhill for me. The wedding itself was a lot of fun, and vibes were up and everyone was having a great time dancing all together. At one point, I was dancing in a big circle with my coworker and her family. Everyone was laughing and smiling. It was super cute. I really don't think I looked weird, and I know I wasn't being over the top with my dancing. Sure, I might not be the best dancer, but I just wanted to enjoy myself and have fun at my friend's wedding. I had been dancing for a little while before my boyfriend angrily stormed onto the dance floor and grabbed me by the elbow. He forced me off the dance floor and kept saying that I was effing embarrassing him with my bullshit tea. I could smell the alcohol on him and I knew he was already heavily intoxicated. This was it for me. I had had enough of my boyfriend's negativity and controlling nature. I ripped my arm back from him and told him if he didn't like my dancing, he could go the hell home. I said this was my friend's wedding and I was going to enjoy myself despite his SHT mood. I told him I really didn't even want him here, and that I was tired of his constant negativity. He started to get even more upset with me, and he even reached out to grab me again a bit. At that point I was dancing away. He did end up leaving the wedding, and I turned my phone off for the rest of the night. When I got home and turned it on the next day, he had spent hours texting and calling me, telling me what a beach I was and how we were over. Good, he just saved me another useless conversation that I didn't want to have.
I refuse to forgive my pathological lying sister who accused me rape. My family is forcing me to. This story takes place 7 years ago. At this time I, 18, and my biological sister, 15, had always gotten into arguments. They would be small petty things but then blew up because we just didn't get along. My father at the time was in his third marriage and his new wife brought in 3 daughters. So I had 4 younger sisters, 1 biological sister and 3 stepsisters. My father was military and we got sent to a military station in Japan. One day during a summer before school, our parents told us 3 teenagers, my bio sister, stepsister, and I were told that one of us would be sent back to our families in the United States due to the constant fighting. It was ultimately decided that my bio sister would be sent back to live with our bio mother, while the rest of us stayed. Start of the school year I was starting 12th grade, my stepsister 10th grade and my bio sister would be starting her freshman year of high school. Few months into the school year, I got brought into my parents' room saying we need to talk. To my shock it was that my bio sister had accused me of inappropriate touching and said it was done when we were kids. My parents asked me about what she could be talking about and the only incident was when I was 11 I said something inappropriate in front of her that I learned on the internet. I got apprehended for it and was taught my lesson. My parents and my 3 younger stepsisters learned that my bio sister is a pathological liar and was caught multiple times in said lies. My parents said that due to this I was no longer allowed to babysit my 2 younger siblings, still in elementary school, and that I had to always be with my teenage stepsister or an adult with them. When I called them out on believing a pathological liar, they said we don't believe her but we have to take this seriously. My response to them was if you take this seriously then you are fueling her fire more. This led to my being shunned by most of my family on my mom's side and my dad's side, besides an aunt, uncle and a few cousins. Fast forward 2 years later, I am about to be shipped out into the military with my aunt and uncle, who didn't believe my bio sister, and I got a call from my bio mother saying that my bio sister was in a hospital for attempting self-unalive. I asked how this pertains to me since she also knew how I felt about my bio sister, and she said that with her recovering from the incident the truth came out that she fabricated the inappropriate touching. Immediately my mother apologized to me and said that my bio sister's reasoning was that he seemed so happy over there. I thought nothing of it and accepted my mother's apology. Fast forward to today where I am now, 25, have moved on with my life but still have not forgiven her or plan to. I have served almost 6 years in the military and most of my family has tried to or did apologize for everything that happened with my sister and didn't believe her for a second. My family keeps on asking if I would ever sit down with her to talk it out and I always refuse saying I love her as a sister but will never like her as a person. She has told family that she's willing to patch things up to me if I apologize to her about the situation and I outright laughed and said hell no. My family keeps on hounding me that she's my only real sibling but I have 3 younger sisters, my stepsisters, who still view me as their older brother with no issues and I am now uncle to my sister's new son. I don't want or feel that I have any obligations to sit down with her to fix things because of the seriousness of her actions. But my family is saying that I should mend things since that is my blood and blood is family. Have you ever gone crazy before? I have, once, and it was so much worse than I thought. To my shame, it was all because of a plate of vegetables. Yes, it's true, I once went completely insane over a plate of vegetables. Shortly after the 2018 Spring Festival, I shaved my head, leaving it uneven and resembling a dog's chewed bone. At the same time, I caught a severe cold and spent several days sitting in my bedroom, constantly blowing my nose by the window. Perhaps my dog-chewed haircut attracted too much attention, or maybe my loud nose blowing was too annoying. Whatever the reason, it made my family members very unhappy. In a fit of anger, I packed my things and left home. I didn't have much, not even enough to fill a backpack. On the 5th day of the Lunar New Year, I randomly picked a destination at the town's train station and bought a ticket. From childhood until then, I thought I only got seasick, but who would have thought I would also get motion sickness on a long-distance bus? Less than 5 minutes into the journey, I started feeling nauseous. With my conspicuous haircut and vomiting on the bus, I became the center of attention, attracting the passengers' curious gaze. Feeling like a monster, I even wanted to curse them. I put on my hood, hid my shaved head, and buried my face in a plastic bag to continue vomiting. I felt sick the whole way, and it was already noon by the time we reached our destination. As I stumbled off the bus, feeling weak and dizzy, I bent over and put my hands on my knees to catch my breath before I felt a bit better. When I raised my head, the sky had already turned dark. It was hard to believe. Had the world changed while I was catching my breath? Or had I been standing there for too long? At that moment, hunger overwhelmed me. My stomach was empty, and I could hardly walk steadily due to hunger. I quickly left the station to find a restaurant without thinking about anything else. There were many motorcycle taxis outside the station, and the drivers in this small town were particularly enthusiastic, almost forcing me to take a ride. I kept waving them off, saying I didn't need a ride, but they kept asking. Exhausted, hungry, and eager to leave, I shouted, "I don't need a ride. Can't you understand? I want to eat." My outburst took aback the drivers, and there was silence for a few seconds. Then one of them pointed me in a direction and said there was a restaurant there, and I should hurry to eat. I thanked him and, like a starving wolf, rushed towards the restaurant. It was mealtime, and there were quite a few people inside. Everyone had their luggage by their feet, and some hugged their bags. They were probably passengers who had just arrived like me. I found a seat and sat down, suddenly realizing my backpack was missing. I had no idea when it disappeared, whether it was on the bus, during a rest stop, or while arguing with those motorcycle taxi drivers. Nothing was precious in my backpack. I always kept my ID, phone, and earphones. The only thing of value was a notebook computer. After quickly considering my options, I decided to eat first and then search for my bag. The restaurant was a Chinese-style fast food joint, and the menu consisted of various noodles and stir-fried dishes. After enduring the discomfort of motion sickness, I only wanted something light to eat. When I placed my order, I asked the waitress if they could blanch some greens for me, charging me the price of a stir-fried vegetable dish, which was simpler and quicker to prepare. She apologized and said they had run out of greens for the day and didn't have any stir-fried vegetables left either. I sighed, feeling unlucky, and ordered eggplant instead, asking if they could make it boiled instead of braised, charging me the price of a braised eggplant dish, which was also simpler and quicker to prepare. The waitress agreed, and I thanked her. Sitting alone at the table, I couldn't help but wonder when and where. My backpack had disappeared. That black backpack had been with me for a long time. I carried it back from Europe to China, from one broken home to another indifferent one. It accompanied me through 3 years of high school and my undergraduate studies. It had been my pillow, protected me from the rain, and held my trophies and certificates from competitions. It had even been used as a bandage to stop my bleeding. It had been with me for so long that it felt like it had witnessed a whole phase of my life. Its appearance had been washed out, and I wondered who would want to steal such a worn-out bag. The waitress brought my food, and it was a plate of braised eggplant, not boiled as I had requested. I stared at the plate of braised eggplant and asked why it wasn't boiled. Didn't they promise to make it boiled for me? Why did they bring braised eggplant instead? The waitress explained that another table had ordered braised eggplant, and the chef had made extra, claiming that braised eggplant was tastier and went better with rice. I said I didn't want it and asked for boiled eggplant, not braised. They shouldn't have substituted one for the other. I couldn't eat braised eggplant as if it were boiled. The waitress tried to convince me that they were both edible and that braised eggplant was even tastier. It had meat in it too. Besides, they didn't have boiled eggplant on their menu, they always made eggplant this way. I firmly refused, raised my voice, and said, "They are completely different dishes. I don't want something flavorful, I want something light. I don't want to braise, I want to boil. Why can't you fulfill a customer's request?" Despite feeling dizzy from hunger, I put on a show of overturning the table. Stubborn and angry, I kept asking the waitress why they brought me braised eggplant. I almost grabbed her before being pulled back. After that, I grabbed the collars of a few other customers and asked them if they had seen a black backpack. I cried. And made a scene, behaving like a madman. This was all recounted to me later by someone present that day. I only remembered a few lines of dialogue from when they brought the wrong dish, and everything after that was blank. Even hearing their description shocked me, as it was something I couldn't believe I would do while conscious. The experience of going mad is like losing control of oneself, losing rationality, and being manipulated by something else, leading to a series of irrational and uncontrollable actions. To this day, I still can't accurately describe what took over me during that time. However, in a way, it was a blessing in disguise.
My boyfriend's sexist brother called me fat in front of his family. So I humiliated him by bringing up how his girlfriend kicked him out for being a piece of poop. So I have been dating my boyfriend for 8 months. All is good so far. Then a week ago he said he wants me to meet his family. I agreed, and honestly I was nervous and giddy about it because I felt like everything was going really smoothly and was excited about where it was going. He called his parents and they were really excited to meet me, so we decided to make it a weekend. His parents have a spare room, so they offered it to us. When we got there I was greeted with hugs from mother-in-law and his siblings. His father gave me a stern pat on the back, but he seems like a reserved type of man, so I took it as a good sign. His other brother worked on Saturdays, so he would only be here for dinner. We sat down and chatted. Then it came down to dinner. It's hot and I am in a summer dress. So that's when Mike came home. He lives with his parents after a nasty breakup with his ex a year ago. My boyfriend told me she screamed at him on Christmas for being a controlling sexist. She kicked him out of their apartment. When my boyfriend introduced me, Mike looked me up and down but didn't say anything but "Nice to meet you." I brushed it off. Halfway through dinner, the convo is flowing nicely and I feel comfortable, then Mike out of the blue asks if I'm pregnant. Now, I am what people call mid-size. Kudos to my boyfriend who choked on his food, he got really upset by that comment. I replied with a laugh and said no. My boyfriend was staring daggers at Mike, who was staring at me. Then he said, "Your boyfriend has never dated a fat girl before." I was so shocked my mouth went dry. Everyone kind of sucked in air and froze. I think everyone was too stunned to speak because we were all frozen and staring. I was staring at Mike when he looked down at my breasts and continued, "And you're showing a lot of skin." I'm not sure if he Was trying to haze me, but that did it. I laughed so loudly that a few people jumped. I said, "You'd think a 26-year-old man living with mommy and daddy would learn not to judge people, but then again, your girlfriend kicked you out for being a piece of poop, so what do I know?" Everyone else laughed. Mike got angry, stood up and told me fat girls shouldn't judge people. So I told him that neither should a man with a micro. Easy to say dinner was ruined. Mike got up and stormed out of the house. My boyfriend took me to our room to calm me down. He told me what I did was justified. His parents knocked and apologized for what Mike did and told me that they will reprimand him for being disrespectful. They kind of laughed and told me that no one has ever stood up to Mike before and that was the first.
My entitled father wants to use my wood without my permission and use my mom's pension to pay it off. So I donated them all to my friend as an FU to him. My dad is a stereotypical white boomer man. He believes that as the man of the house everything belongs to him. He likes to remind my mom that she would be nothing without him, and is dependent on his generosity. So my mom has a giant tortoise named Duncan that she rescued several years ago. Mom does all of the daily care, while I built the enclosure and house for her. It took me a few months and over $2,000 in supplies to get Duncan a suitable habitat. At the time, we agreed that the wood and supplies belonged to me, as I bought all of it, and did all the work to design and build the house. About a year ago I moved into an apartment. I had talked with my parents, and they agreed that when I got my own house, I would take Duncan and her house pen and she would become my tortoise. Recently, Mom has been having health issues, so Duncan will have to be rehomed since I can't keep her in an apartment. I talked to one of my friends who owns her own home, and she would love to take Duncan. She has a fenced-in yard, so she won't need any of the wood, just the house and Duncan. Mom and I were on board with this idea, and we thought that Dad would store the wood until I had my own house. Well, the other day my mom overheard my dad talking about all the stuff he was going to build with my wood. He never asked me, never asked my mom, didn't say a word to either of us. He was just going to take it. She asked him about it later, and he just waved her off and said it was none of her business. Since I left it in his property, obviously I don't want it so he can do whatever with it. She mentioned how much I paid for it, and he said that she could write me a check. Not him, and his money, but Mom and her meager savings. She only gets a few $100s of Social Security a month, and he expects her to use all of it to pay me off so he can use my wood. Now I don't need the wood, and I can't use it. If he had asked, I'd be happy to let him use it, and I wouldn't have asked for money either. But because of how rude and entitled he was, I reached out to my friend and told her that I'd give her the wood too, and she could use it for whatever she wanted. She accepted but said that she probably won't use it. Well, my dad caught wind that I'm planning on moving my stuff without his permission, and he is pissed. It's not his stuff, it's not his tortoise, he has no involvement in this entire situation. But he wants to dictate the whole thing, and he is very upset that Mom and I made plans without consulting him. My PP is too big and I hate it. My PP is so large I just cannot lug it around any longer. It is so insanely huge and has caused so many problems in my life. I cannot go to airports as they think I'm sneaking something in. So every time I go, I get touched as they try to take my PP off thinking it's a bomb. I cannot pleasure women as they are so horrified at the sight of my PP, that they immediately run away. My mother and father disown me after seeing the length of my shaft. Not only is it extraordinarily long, it is just too thick. I cannot relieve myself as my hands are just too small to choke the chicken. My humongous PP has ruined my life. I resent God for cursing me with this large chunk of meat that just drags across the ground. Doctors tell me I will never be able to get a PP reduction as they would have nowhere to put the PP. It would just take up far too much room. I had a girlfriend when I was a young lad. She loved me for who I was and did not care for this deformity. But one day, I took off my jeans and my PP flung out, smacking her and flinging her out the window. She died 2 hours later in the hospital. She was the only woman who ever loved me. My PP is just too ginormous. It has caused problems for myself and the people around me. For this reason, I will be ending it all. My P has taken over my life, but it cannot take over a life that does not exist.
My fiancé cheated on me with my father. My wife Elle and I met in her freshman year of college. We were both dorming in the same building where we eventually met. We later found out we lived 2 towns away from each other, so whenever we went home, I let her drive with me. It was only added like 20 minutes, so it was no big deal. We got really close during those trips, and we would share our intimate selves to each other. I felt a very deep and personal connection with her rather quickly. After multiple trips and hanging out at school, we started to date. I have a close-knit family, as did she, so we told our families right away. I had met her family plenty of times when dropping her off, but it was nothing more than an introduction and exchanging pleasantries. Both of our families accepted each other with open arms, and our relationship grew. I was a year ahead of her, so when I graduated, I went home where I was offered a good job with great pay. I visited her at school whenever I got the chance, and whenever she came home, we would make time for each other. After she graduated, she moved in with me. After living together for about 3 years, I proposed, and we've been planning our wedding since. Looking back, there were plenty of things I overlooked that I just wrote off thinking my father was just trying to welcome my ex into our family. Things like my father calling her all the time, and if I was around, they would just tell me they were talking about the upcoming family party or something along those lines. One time, Elle was in the shower and her phone rang. I saw it was my dad, so I answered. When he realized it was me, he sounded both upset and surprised that I picked up. I then asked, "What's up?" He responded that he wanted to talk to Elle about my mother's birthday that was in a week. And after a minute, we ended the call. I feel like an idiot for not seeing it sooner. On the day I found out, it was like any other day. I'll have Thursdays off. So she made breakfast for both of us. When I set out for work, she gave me a kiss and told me to have a great day. During my drive to work, I realized I had forgotten some paperwork I would need for a meeting I had at 3 p.m. I shrugged it off and told myself I would just go home at lunch to get it. Elle texted me throughout the day talking about all the casual stuff. A couple talked about, like, what do you want for dinner? I did the laundry, do you want me to hang it up for you? Blah, blah, blah. I didn't think it necessary to text her that. I was coming home for lunch, so when it came around, I just left work and went home. When I got home, I noticed a car that looked like my father's in our parking lot, but I didn't think anything of it, just parked and went into our building. When I opened the door, I was met with a scene from a movie where a man comes home early and catches his spouse cheating. Such a cliché. There was a trail of clothes, both his and hers, leading to my bedroom, and the sound of faint moans echoed through my apartment. I stood at the door in utter shock. My brain was a mix of rage, sadness, and disgust. But if you were a fly on my wall, you would see what looked like a statue. I just couldn't move. When I finally snapped to, not knowing how much time had passed, I took out my phone to record. I picked up all the clothes that were on the floor and threw them into the hall of the building. After I filmed the walk to my bedroom, the door was open, so I stood in the doorway filming for about a minute, then flipped on the lights. They both jumped at the sudden light and looked at me, into my utter shock. It was my father in the bed with her. After the initial stun, my father noticed I was recording and started to panic, trying to find anything to cover himself and telling me to stop recording. He found a towel and wrapped it around himself and started to walk toward me. I told him, if you don't want to get hurt, stop coming to me. He either didn't care or didn't hear me and reached for my phone. I hit him square on the jaw. His head bounced off the door and slumped to the ground. Elle shrieked. I aimed the camera at Alan, said, concerned about your F-buddy, but nothing to say to your fiancé? My father woke up after about a minute nap, and I told them I just needed to come pick something up for work. So I'm heading back now. If either of you pieces of SHTS are here when I get back, I'll send this video to everyone you know. I ended the video, looked at my dad, who was still coming, too, and said, you're dead to me. You're no longer my father. But you might want to go home and talk to Mom, because I'll be talking to her very soon. I sat in my car for a while until one of the bosses at work called to ask where I was. I told her I was on my way back right now. When I got to her office to hand her the paperwork, I must have looked awful because she started asking what was wrong with me. I told her it was nothing and I'd be okay. I could see her scanning me up and down, and she noticed some blood on my collar, stood up and rushed to me and said, you're bleeding. I looked down and said it was my father's. She looked confused, so I pulled out my phone and showed her the video. She watched it in its entirety. She was introduced to, well, a few times, but never my father. She sat there silent for a moment until it finally clicked that my fiancé was cheating on me. But not only was she cheating, it was with my father. She asked if there was anything she could do, suggesting I take some time off, but I told her I can't go back there right now, that I just need a minute and I'll be fine for the meeting. And I have another shirt in my office. The meeting went over fine. I put on a smile for everyone like nothing had happened. My boss came up to me after the meeting and asked how I could do that, but I just said I didn't know and went to my office. I then came home, and I was alone for the first time in a very long time. I just don't know what to do. I definitely need to get the hell out of this apartment. I just can't live here anymore, and there's no possible way I'm sleeping in that bed. I know. Not only do I have to go get checked out, for STDs, but I think I broke something in my hand. Go to part 2. My fiancé cheated on me with my father. I tried to get into contact with my mother, but none of my calls were connecting. I wanted to see if she would get lunch with me and I tell her everything. After about a dozen tries, I decided to get into my car and go to my mother's house. She needed to know what happened as soon as possible, even if talking about this was going to make it hurt all over again. During the drive, I thought about what I would say and how I would say it. That made me start to panic. I had to pull over twice to throw up. It's not every day you have to tell your mom that her husband is screwing your fiancé. I pulled into the driveway and sat in my car for a moment to calm down and gather my thoughts. I was in my car for a few minutes when my mother threw her front door open, so I stepped out of my car. She started cursing at me, saying, how dare I come to her home after I hit my father for trying to break up a fight between Al and I, huh? Did I hear that right? Someone tell Brody that I have a video of him screwing my fiancé. She called me every name in the book and called me an abuser. She told me I needed to leave since Elle isn't ready to forgive me yet. That if she's smart, she hopefully never will. Yes. Apparently. My father took Elle to my family's home and told my mom that Elle and I argued. And when my father tried to spot it, I hit him. She continued on for a while until I finally snapped and said, really, Mom? Because your husband is effing my fiancé. That's why I hit him. And if you can't take my word for it, I have a video. I'll send it to you. But because my own mother can talk to me like this, don't expect to see me again. I don't want to hear your apology when you finally figure out that you're just as poop of a mom as my piece of poop father. Her face dropped, and she looked like what I must have looked like when I first walked into my apartment and caught them. I pulled out my phone and sent her the video. She watched up. Until the part where I turned on the light. She then put her phone down. She looked up at me, but I turned and went into my car. I backed out of her driveway. I looked at her before I took off, and she was in tears. My heart felt for her, but too much was said during that fight for me to pull back in and forgive her. When I got home, I started clearing everything out of my apartment that had to do with Elle or my family. I boxed all of Elle's things up and put them next to the front door. Legally, this has been her place of residence, so I can't technically kick her out. Her name isn't on the lease. Also, she's the type of person who shies away from conflict, and if she returns other than to pick her things up, there will be plenty of conflict. Anything that had to do with my parents, I boxed up and put into storage. We were a very close family, but I've never had a problem cutting toxic people out of my life. I texted Elle's parents and told them that I'm calling off the engagement, as she's been cheating on me. I thank them for everything they've done for me. Our relationship was still building, but they were kind and supportive of me, so this just added more hurt to the mix. I finished by asking if they would come pick up all of her belongings. I haven't gotten a response from them yet, but I'm hoping they will come grab her things so Elle doesn't have a reason to come back here. Missing children, what happened? When I was 16, I got into a fight with my mother about how to properly load dishes into a dishwasher. Actually, she yelled a lot and I failed to react. They were dishes, who cares? At that point in my life, she was running her own business and my father was working full-time, so all of the chores in the house were being done by me personally anyway, and at that point I had been loading the dishwasher incorrectly for the better part of 6 years and felt it didn't matter if she thought it was wrong now. Well, I decided that telling her that was the way to end the argument. As you can probably predict, it did not. She threw me out of the house. In typical teenage fashion, I told her if she threw me out then I wasn't coming back. At that point she had escalated to white-hot rage and said something like, "We don't want you here anyway." Well, that was all I needed, and really she should have been paying better attention to me. See, I had gotten a job as soon as I had turned 14 and I had purchased my own car. I had been buying my own clothes and things for years with money from that job. I left and could honestly say that I hadn't taken anything from the house that I hadn't personally paid for. To that end, I left my cell phone on the table. They had no way to get in contact. So, hours later when my mother's anger faded and she realized that she had just thrown her 16-year-old child into the streets over the dishes, she called the police. Well, the police showed up and heard her out. They put out the details on my car to try and find me, but they told her that since I had a car and clothes and had my own bank account, and I had been gone for hours, there was no guarantee that I was even in the state anymore. They really only started looking so soon as a favor to my mother. They weren't required to look at all since it was clear that I was a runaway that had left under my own power. My father came home from work and was bewildered by all the chaos. I wish I could have seen his face. After 48 hours they had me declared missing, which apparently made my profile available to other states and such. And that was how they found me. 2 weeks later, 18 hours away. I was sitting on the hood of my car eating ice cream and filling out a job application. An officer noticed I was illegally parked and casually scanned my plates while he approached to ask me to move. I don't think he was going to give me a ticket, it was just a reflexive action. I came up as a missing kid and he stopped mid-question and sort of stuttered, you should call your mother. I nodded agreeably and he gave me his cell phone. I dialed my mother's number from the heart and she picked it up. As soon as I identified myself, she turned into a screaming rage monster of hatred and insults. I casually put the phone on speaker for the officer to hear and his eyes widened. She didn't stop to take a breath and let me get a word in, so I hung up on her. I told the officer that I was fine where I was and since it had already escalated to this point I was going to hold out for an apology or divine intervention. He sort of patted my shoulder and made sure I had someplace warm to sleep at night. 2 days later my dad showed up and got me. The officer had called the department that the missing persons report originated from and gotten my father's contact details and told him that if the situation was left to my mother to resolve, they would never see me again. I agreed that it was for the best.
When I got on my flight, the flight attendant gave me a strange list of rules. Can I check your willy? Can I check your ticket please? I handed the ticket, weirded out that she asked to see my beautiful pecker, but I brushed it off. After she saw my ticket, she produced a sheet of paper from the file that she was holding and placing it inside my folded ticket. "Have a nice flight," she commented enthusiastically before handing my ticket back to me. I grabbed my ticket and stared at the folded sheet of paper inside my ticket curiously before finding my seat. Once I settled down in my seat, I removed the folded sheet of paper from my ticket and placed the ticket in my bag. Upon unfolding the sheet of paper, I realized it was a handwritten note. The handwriting seemed rushed. I've transcribed the note from memory here. Rules for surviving this flight. Do not speak of this sheet to any passenger. You are the only human on this flight. Check the time on your phone after reading the sheet. All rules will apply based on the time of your phone. During the first hour of the flight, do not talk to anyone. People may try to talk to you but ignore them completely. During the second hour of the flight, you may start talking again, but if anyone mention the window, do not look outside the window in any circumstances. If you hear a child crying in the cabin, immediately run to the bathroom. If the screen of your entertainment console suddenly goes black, immediately look away and do not stare at it. During the third hour of the flight, the captain will make an announcement. Follow the instructions. During the 4th hour of the flight, do not sit in your seat. If you make it past the 4th hour, you will need to spend the rest of the flight evading the chaser. You will know who the chaser is when you see them. The captain will make an announcement of the plane landing. As soon as you hear this announcement, push your way to the exit door and open it. You will find that the outside is simply a black void. Jump into it without hesitation. I reread the rules again while chuckling. Did they give one of these to every passenger, or was I somehow randomly chosen for this prank? I checked the time on my phone just to humor the list. 7:13 a.m. So this would be the first hour of the flight. Suddenly a young man walked over to my seat and sat right beside me. I gave him a casual side glance and saw that he was carrying what looked to be a laptop bag. Great, I thought. He'll work on whatever he's doing and leave me alone for the flight. The man didn't even bother to exchange a single word with me as he settled down in his seat and put on his seatbelt. He stared straight ahead and completely avoided me. I let him be and started to fiddle with my flight console. Some people just like to be left alone, I guess. Soon enough the captain made an announcement of the plane starting and the steady hum of the plane engine started to vibrate the entire cabin. The plane started to accelerate until the G-force pushed me into my seat. Moments later I felt the plane rising into the air. I am typically not scared of flights, but getting on a flight always makes me a bit nervous. This time though, my stomach was in knots and beads of sweat were running down my forehead. My instincts told me I was stepping into danger, grave danger. I dismissed my thoughts and that awful gut feeling, chalking it down to feeling a little creeped out by the note. The young man on my left suddenly tapped on my shoulder. I jolted up like I'd just been electrocuted. Even through my jacket, his hand felt cold. Cold and heavy, like a dead person's hand. I turned around and faced the young man. His face seemed wrong. You know how those realistic human robots can creep people out because of how close to human they are, yet subconsciously we can tell that they aren't human. This man was giving me that same unsettling feeling and his facial features were just artificial in a way I couldn't place. Maybe it was his eyes. A little too big, the pupils abnormally dilated. Or maybe it was his nose, not exactly in the center of his face. Or perhaps it was his mouth, lips way too thin and long. Don't get me wrong, he didn't look obnoxiously fake. In fact, it was those very subtle blemishes in his facial features that made him look like something trying to look like a human. And then he spoke. His voice was normal. Upon hearing his voice, the man seemed to look normal too, and I thought I was just freaking out for no reason. Hey, do you wear headphones? He asked. That was a weird question to ask. Did he want headphones? I was about to open my mouth to speak when he spoke again. How would you feel if I cut your hand off right now? What was disturbing wasn't the nature of the question itself, but the fact that he spoke in such a calm manner. It was as if he was asking me how my day was. Suddenly my mind went to the list of rules that I had subconsciously been squeezing in my hand. The first rule said to not talk to anyone on the flight no matter how much they try to talk to you. I decided to ignore the man. He seemed really weird anyways, and if I was being honest, the list of rules wasn't the reason I chose to ignore him. He stopped pestering me and returned to work on his laptop. I looked over at his laptop slowly and gasped at what I saw on his screen. He had a photo of me on his screen. That's it. Nothing else, just a full screen photo of me. Before I could process that properly, I looked over at his keyboard and noticed that it wasn't a standard keyboard. In fact, it really wouldn't even count as a keyboard. It was made up of oddly shaped keys, all marked with strange letters that I doubt existed. The man continued to stare intently at the photo of me on his screen. It was then that I realized that the list of rules wasn't a joke. Suddenly a flight attendant popped out of nowhere and asked me, "Sir, is this man bothering you?" "Yes, he is," I replied before my voice caught up in my throat. In under a second, everyone in the cabin snapped their heads around until they were staring directly at me. Their faces, they all looked wrong. Inhuman. Slowly their long thin lips curled into wide smiles and red tears started to roll down their faces.
You break into someone's house, what are you stealing that will only mildly inconvenience them? All the backs of the earrings. A single inch from a single table, a leg for every table. All their stuff is going to have a permanent wobble. Take all the labels off all the cans in the house. All the knives but the butter knives. Shower head. A sock from each pair they own. All their phone chargers. The plunger, they probably won't even notice it's gone until they really need it. I will take use and return all of their coupons. The toilet.
My husband wants to divorce me because I don't want to eat mustard. I'm not a picky eater. In fact, I'm quite adventurous. Every time I've traveled, I've always made it a point to try dishes with unusual ingredients. There are very few foods I won't eat. One of them is mustard. I don't like it. I just don't. The taste is very strong and overpowering. It's an unpleasant taste for me. I've tried yellow, stone ground, honey, artisan, brown, spicy, you name it. I have tried them all. And I just don't like it. My husband for some reason never understood this. He loves mustard, especially honey mustard. He puts it on all his sandwiches and dips his fries in it. And every time he tries to force me to try it, he'll insist I'll like it this time. I'm a grown woman. I know what I don't like. And I don't like mustard. So I'll say no and it'll devolve into a mini argument where he'll call me picky. Well, last night we were on the road home from a weekend trip. He stopped at a gas station to get us a quick bite. He got a hot dog slathered in mustard. I got one but decided to keep it plain. While we waited in line, he asked what I got on mine. I told him nothing. He actually got furious and grabbed it from me. He marched over to the condiment station and began putting mustard on my hot dog. He told me to grow up and stop being picky. I just walked out and sat in the car. I didn't even want the DMN hot dog anymore. My appetite was gone. But I did not expect his next reaction. He came back and began screaming, saying he ought to smack me upside the head. He called me a stubborn bitch and that he would divorce me. He also said that he would run the car off the effing road if I didn't start acting right. The word divorce was said for the first time ever. I secretly recorded his screaming because I was genuinely afraid I would die. He was driving erratically, swerving, and speeding. I went to a hotel tonight. He ignored me all day at work, and then the calls started around when he realized I wasn't coming home. Non-stop voicemails and texts. He sent me a screenshot of a Google search for local divorce lawyers. But then, he found the hotel where I was staying. I guess he followed me from work. He was waiting in the lobby. I was afraid of making a scene, so I sat with him in the lounge area and talked. I pointed out the security camera and said if he tried to hurt me, there'd be footage. I would press charges without a second thought. He was completely shocked and said he'd never hurt me. I reminded him how I feared for my life in the car. He ignored me. He asked why I wasn't coming home. I was completely blank-faced when I told him, because you're divorcing me. He said he didn't mean it and was just upset. I said, when normal people are upset, they express it in a healthy way. You threatened the end of our marriage. I'm taking you seriously.
My dumb girlfriend thinks it's gay if I give a man a BL job for $1 million. I told her I would give her brother a BL job too for the same amount. I've been dating my girlfriend for just under a year. Things have been going great and I felt like we were still getting closer every day until this situation popped up. A few days ago, my girlfriend and I were at a party with friends, and there was a new guy there. He seemed charming and nice, but when the topic of women came up, he said it's been years since he had any luck and he was going a little crazy. The conversation moved on and that was the end of that topic. Last night in bed, I was talking with my girlfriend before sleeping and we started to discuss the party. The new guy came up and we agreed he seemed cool and we were both surprised he was having a hard time with women. I mentioned his comment about it being years since being with anyone and said I bet he's going nuts. My girlfriend laughed and said that maybe one of her friends would give him a pity BL job. Anyway, she said he was cute in a way, but not her type. She wouldn't blow him for $1 million. I thought this was extreme and said if she wouldn't do it for $1 million, I certainly would. Hell, money is money and it would just be a few minutes probably. I was laughing, but now she wasn't. She stared at me and asked if I was serious. I said yes, that's a life-changing amount of money for something people do every day. She sat up and said that nobody who is straight would do that for any amount of money. She asked if I was gay. I said no. She asked if I would give her brother a BL job for $1 million and I said probably. She got angry and went to sleep. I thought that was the end of it, but this morning she told me she didn't want me to be at her place today and she needed time to think. She said she saw a future with me but was worried that I would eventually leave her for a man after years of lying to myself. I tried to convince her that my response was normal, but she wasn't having it. I texted my friend and asked if he would give me a BL job for $1 million. He replied, only if I don't have to give you any money. My girlfriend said he's probably gay too and it makes sense that you hang out with him. So now I'm home and maybe girlfriend less. So, once and for all, is it gay to give a BJ for $1 million?
What ended a relationship with your best friend? A reversal of fortunes. It's very painful to think back about what happened to my friendship with Annie, but I will miss her until the day I die. We met at work when I was 25 and she was 22. It was a small office and we were the only two girls. She was such a sweet, fun, classy person and we bonded immediately. We spent the next 5 years working side by side, sharing our joys, happinesses, trials and tribulations. I shared things with her that I never shared with anyone else and she did the same with me. We were closer than sisters. Annie had a wonderful, carefree life. She and her husband were quite well off compared to me and mine. She was working to put her husband through medical school, but she had also inherited some money and they were well off financially. They went on regular scuba diving vacations to the Bahamas. They purchased a home at the same time we did in a more exclusive neighborhood and installed a pool and upscale landscaping. They purchased a boat. All in all, she had a beautiful life, and I was so proud to have her as a friend. My life, in comparison, was a struggle. We lived paycheck to paycheck. There was never enough money for unexpected, but necessary, expenses. We had a son, so while Annie and her husband were traveling and vacationing, we were spending our money on daycare, preschool, and after-school care. I lived vicariously through Annie's life. I loved hearing about her vacations and the people they traveled with. I loved seeing the jewelry she received for special occasions. Once, after telling me about something going on in her life, she got quiet and then asked me a serious question. Do you ever get jealous when I talk about this stuff? It surprised me. I told her no and that I loved hearing about all the fun places and things she was able to go to and do, but she asked again. Like she just couldn't understand. But how can you not be jealous? I told her I was just happy for her and was hopeful that I would one day be able to do those things as well. Maybe one day when our son moved away from home. And we laughed and life went on. 11 years into our friendship, her husband was a doctor. They lived in a beautiful upscale community in Florida, and a nanny for her daughter since she still worked. My husband and I were still struggling in the same house with the same financial issues, during a particularly terrible time. By then we had 2 children. I called her crying and she sent me an airline ticket to Florida. I literally ran away from home and lived with her for 10 days before I was able to get myself sorted out and return home. It was something I'll always cherish. Fast forward another 10 plus years when we are both in our early 40s, Annie starts falling on hard times and my career begins to take off. Annie and her husband file for bankruptcy, lose almost everything and eventually divorce. She moves to another state and spends another lump sum inheritance on a small business that goes bust within a year. She calls and tells me she doesn't know how she will be able to put food on the table for her children. She has 3 at this time. I wake up in the middle of the night because I can't sleep thinking about her. I empty my wallet and send her $180 with a loving note about how confident I am that things are going to turn around. Annie goes back to work and struggles but manages to scrap up enough money to buy a starter home. We continue to talk long distance. Meanwhile, I'm promoted and transferred to another state. We stay in touch. She visits to see the new house and stays for a few days. When we talk, she seems disappointed that my husband and I are doing okay. She reminds me of issues we've had in the past. Fast forward another few years, I am promoted and transferred yet again. With every promotion, she asks what my new salary is. I tell her. I trust her. I look at her as a sister. We have no secrets. She says she's proud of me and that I've taught her so much. I tell her how much she means to me. But there is something I'm beginning to notice. The last time I saw her, she came to visit the new house as she was passing through our town. She seemed shocked and almost disappointed that I was driving a luxury car. Something in her tone about how I was moving up in the world. We laughed about the rusty car I used to drive where I killed a roach with a hammer as I was driving. I began to feel self-conscious when she commented on the rock I was wearing on my ring finger. I downplayed it. It's not so big. It just looks big. It was a gift to myself. I pull my hands back so it's not so visible. I'm sensing something, but can't quite understand what it is. Fast forward a few more years to 2007, 32 years into the friendship. We are talking on the phone, and I mention that we are going on a trip to Las Vegas and how excited I am. She says she has a $100 chip from the Mirage that she's going to send me. I protest, but she insists it's money she owes me. I'm perplexed. You don't owe me any money. And what she says next is like a knife to the heart because she almost spits it out and her voice is full of venom and hate. She said, quote, for the $180. We were silent for a few seconds as her words hung in the air. I was speechless. It took my breath away. I mumbled okay and she mailed it to me. I thought a lot about that conversation and replayed our friendship in my head. I immediately regretted sending her the money. I had sent it 10 years earlier and completely forgot about it. She had not. I remembered what she had done for me when she flew me to Florida and I wanted to do something for her. I couldn't fly her to my home because she was a single parent with 2 children still in school. In hindsight, I thought maybe I should have asked before sending the money. It seemed to me that I was doing most of the calling and staying in touch. Anyway, but we both had busy lives so I didn't think too much about it. But replaying conversations, I began to think that maybe she thought of me as the friend who was always worse off than she was. That maybe I was supposed to be the poor friend. That maybe I was the friend she used to gauge how well she was doing. And that maybe it made her unhappy hearing how well my life was going when hers wasn't going so well. I called from Las Vegas and left a lighthearted message about playing the chip for millions and losing. After that message, I decided to let her call me when she was ready. For 3 years, she never called. It broke my heart. But I didn't want to make her unhappy by calling. We quit exchanging birthday cards. It made me wonder how she viewed me when our fortunes were reversed. Did she pity me in those early years? Did she think that now that our fortunes were reversed that I thought any less of her? I don't know, but it makes me incredibly sad. And then, out of the blue, 3 years later she called. I was ecstatic. We laughed and talked for 2 hours and it was just like old times. She encouraged me to call her every now and then, but as I promised I would, I knew I wouldn't unless she called first. I just wasn't sure whether she was being polite or really wanted to re-establish the friendship and I didn't want to cause her any unhappiness. Sadly, she never called again. One night in 2018, after hearing that a coworker from years ago had died I felt a strong urge to Google Annie. It was then that I found out she had passed away in 2017, almost a year to the day. I cried for days and still cry whenever I think about her. I initially regretted not calling her, but after learning that she continued to struggle, I was glad I waited for her to call me. I believe that it was painful for her to compare our lives and she was happier not knowing how my life was going. Rest in peace, Annie. I have never stopped loving you and am sorry if I was insensitive or hurt you in any way.
Have you ever called in sick but you were convinced or threatened by your superiors to come to work? Did it end well for you? I was assistant manager of a fabric store. Some days I would open the store and other days I would close. One morning I woke up with the flu. I felt horrible. As you can imagine, I was supposed to close that day, so I called very early and told the manager I couldn't come in, hoping to give them the whole work day to find someone to close. The manager said she was just about to call me to open because the other asked MGR had forgotten she had to take her kid to the dentist or something. I said, definitely not because I have the flu and can barely get out of bed. The manager said she really needed me to come in. I explained I had a fever and was dizzy but she said I didn't have a choice. They needed me to come in. I was like, seriously? I can't believe you want me to come and work with the public when I've got the flu. She wouldn't budge, so I got dressed and went to work. One of the things I had to do was open the safe and count all the money to make sure the total matched the night before, and bring the cash drawers out to the registers. Anytime I wasn't in the office, it was policy to lock the safe, even if I was only going to be gone for a minute, and even though the store was closed and doors locked. I counted the drawers but I was having trouble counting the rest of the money because I couldn't concentrate. I was so dizzy. I kept losing track and having to start over. Finally, since it was getting close to opening the store, I decided to take the drawers out to the registers and then come back and try to count the cash. I closed the safe and carried out the drawers. Just as a regional manager came through the door, she went straight to the office. When I came into the office, the safe was standing open. I was shocked because I knew I had closed it. The regional manager asked me why the safe was open, when I knew it was the policy to lock it when I left the office. I said I was certain I had closed it. She said, yes, it was closed but not locked. I tried to explain I wasn't even supposed to be there because I was sick, but she interrupted me and said they were going to have to let me go. I was stunned, as I was one of the most knowledgeable employees in the store and had never missed a day of work. I was standing there swaying and trying not to pass out, and wondering how I was going to support my kids now. The RM told one of the other employees to call someone to replace me so the store wouldn't be shorthanded. I grabbed my stuff and headed for the door. The RM said, where do you think you're going? You have to stay until someone comes to take your shift. If we can't find anyone, you'll finish the day. I looked at her with an incredulous expression. Are you kidding me? I've just been fired for dragging my sick ass out of bed to cover for someone who can't be bothered to keep track of their appointments. I'm going home and going to bed. Then I walked out. My on/off partner of 2 years charged with a heinous crime. What now? I need to get this off my chest and confess what I've been going through recently. My partner, who I have been on and off with, got arrested unexpectedly 2 days ago. Prior to that, he had told me that some former friends, one of whom he had slept with, were turning against him by making false accusations. They claimed that he had been involved with a 14-year-old girl while he was living with these friends. Given our past trust issues and his history of cheating, I had to decide whether I could fully trust him if our relationship was going to work. Even his friends and family, who he lived with, supported him wholeheartedly, convinced that he would never do something so terrible. It has been 2 days since I last heard from him, and I've been worrying constantly about his safety and mental well-being. This morning, I reached out to his friend to ask about his situation, and she confirmed that the accusations were true. My world shattered, and I have been in a state of shock ever since. When I met up with his friend to collect my belongings and understand the whole story, she sat me down and prepared me for the worst. What I had suspected deep down was true, but the reality was even worse than I could have imagined. He had been involved with 56 other girls, including one he had cheated on me with 2 years ago. He had been in a complete relationship with one of them, who had no idea about my existence. Among these girls was the 14-year-old he claimed he didn't even know. It turns out that they had slept together when she was living with him at a friend's house, and even after the police warned him to stay away from her, he continued to send pictures and texts and meet up with her at hotels. I can't find words to express what I'm feeling and what's going through my mind. Part of me believes it's all my fault for being foolish enough to fall for him again, knowing deep down that I wasn't the only one. My confidence and trust are shattered beyond repair. My anxiety has become so overwhelming that I can't even bear to look at young girls without feeling nauseous. To make matters worse, we all live in the same small town, and I could unknowingly encounter these girls. I feel humiliated for ignoring all the signs and now having to explain to my friends and family what he has done to me and others. He has ruined the lives of so many, even the family he lived with since there were children involved, and Child Protective Services is now involved. He is facing a minimum of 5 years in prison and has no one on his side anymore. I remember him always saying that if he had to serve more than 6 months, he would take his own life. Part of me is terrified of losing him, while another part secretly hopes for it to happen. I feel disgusted with myself in so many ways, and I don't know how to live with this shame. The shame of loving a pedophile and a cheater, the shame of reminiscing about our happy memories and feeling devastated that they were all just illusions, and the realization that he shared those memories with so many other girls. The shame of knowing that he touched me and had intimate moments with me probably just hours after being with them. I'm struggling to see how I can continue living like this and what steps to take. I desperately need advice and a place to voice what has just happened to me. I'm in complete shock and trying to comprehend it all. Update, my on/off partner of 2 years charged with a heinous crime. What now? Hey everyone, I wanted to give you an update on what has happened since my last post. It's been a lot to process, and I could really use some advice. For those who missed it, here's a quick recap. After discovering that the guy I, 26F, was seeing was also involved with 6 other girls, including a 14-year-old girl he met at hotels, I had the opportunity to speak with one of the other girls. She was 18 years old and someone I knew he had been involved with in the past. He had repeatedly assured me that their relationship was over, but that turned out to be untrue. She reached out to me late at night via text, asking if I had been dating her boyfriend. We spent the entire night until 6 a.m. talking about his deceitful actions, the lies he told, and sharing our experiences. It all became clear that when he wasn't with me, he was with her, and vice versa. She suggested meeting up to discuss everything or just to offer support and comfort. I agreed, hoping that it would help bring clarity to the situation. The next day, we met at a local pub. We shed some tears, shared a drink, and talked about the man we both believed we loved. So much fell into place, and all the suspicions I had were proven true. For instance, there was a night when he claimed to have gone out for dinner with his mother figure, and I noticed he had shaved, which was unusual for him. He dismissed it, but it turned out that he was actually on a date with the other girl and had met me immediately after. I even used items that belonged to her, and she ended up paying for our takeaways on some nights, thinking they were for him. And incredibly, he played games with me on the Nintendo Switch I had lent him, all while she was right there next to him. This had been going on for a year, during their relationship that he had denied and said wasn't serious. All the while, I had been on and off with him. It never really ended, and the thought of it is incredibly difficult for me to handle. What makes it even harder is that the other girl is lovely, beautiful, and shares similar interests with him, just like I do. The way she talks about their relationship breaks my heart because he wasn't like that with me. However, I acknowledge that she is also facing difficulties. Our relationships with him were different, and it feels strange to be friends with her because we both seem to be jealous of what the other had with him. She wants to continue supporting each other and meeting up, but I'm not sure if I can handle it. Every time she talks about him, it hurts deeply, and I worry that it might be hindering my healing process. She claims to be the only one who understands what I went through, and maybe she's right. It does feel good to have someone who can relate. I'm just unsure about what to do. It sickens me to realize that I even care about whether he loved her more, considering the terrible things he has done, like seeing multiple girls simultaneously and engaging with a minor. I feel disgusted with myself for feeling this way, but I can't seem to stop it. Thank you again for taking the time to read and comment on my previous post. I truly appreciate it, and I continue to refer back to it for support during this difficult time. Your words mean the world to me. Some kids pretend to be sick to skip school. Well, I decided to take things a step further. One night, while I was in 6th grade, I decided I really did not want to go to school the following day. Unfortunately, my mom was really strict about missing classes. According to her, I was not allowed to miss any days unless I was on my deathbed. Being a genius 11-year-old, I decided to look up how to get a fever. I tried everything from taking a cold bath to standing under the fan. Any of the other regular getting sick ideas I could find, I tried. Nothing seemed to be working. I did more research when I came upon a very promising tutorial. All I had to do was take a bath at the hottest temperature my bathtub would go and then stay up all night. I figured since I tried so many things already, this last shot in the dark couldn't hurt. Boy was I wrong. I started the water for a steaming hot bath. It stung to get in it and my skin was getting red and irritated. However, at that time, I believed it was a normal sensation. In my mind, I convinced myself that I just needed to give my body time to acclimate to the temperature. Similar to how a cold bath becomes more bearable the longer you stay in it. Unfortunately, my body never adapted to the heat. Thinking back, it was definitely way too hot to be in, but for some reason I was determined to skip school. Miraculously, I survived the piping hot bath for 30 whole minutes. When I was getting out, I felt dizzy. That's when I fell on the floor and had a full-blown seizure. Immediately after, I passed out. I'm not sure for how long I was out, but when I woke up all I saw was the blinding ceiling lights of the bathroom. The first question that came to mind was, am I dead? But then I threw up in the toilet next to me and realized I was sadly still very much alive. After coming to my senses, I had the most painful migraine imaginable. On top of that, all the skin on my whole body was red and itchy. It hurt to touch and some parts of me even had blisters, but I was so tired that I just went to sleep. I didn't want to tell my mom and dad about any of this and risk the entire plan I was so close to carrying out. I definitely felt like I was getting sick and just had to make the final stretch. The next morning, everything was so much worse. I felt horrible. It got to the point where I felt like I needed actual medical attention. Eventually, I had to tell my mom about everything that happened. She scolded me and immediately brought me to the hospital. When we got there, the doctor informed us that I had given myself first-degree burns. Long story short, it was a very stupid idea, but I guess my plan did work because I didn't have to go to school for the next couple of weeks. I guess sometimes it hurts to be this much of a genius. I found out that my pregnant girlfriend threw a party for her friends and ate all the $1,000 pastries we baked for weddings. She blamed it on pregnancy. Recently, I got 2 massive orders for pastries for 2 weddings and a few other parties. I spent 1 week working with my team on the orders as it was 75 to 100 per item. Well, we finished yesterday. I and the team decided to go to the movies and just relax, which is a big mistake. My now ex had a party planned without asking me in the home. I pay for it while she just sits on her butt doing nothing. She's never had a job. She just waits for everyone to hand her what she needs. We recently found out she was pregnant a month and a half ago, but she's been using it as an excuse. At first, it was just 1 or 2 of them, but it gradually became more. 1 to 2 to 15, 20. Which wasn't an inconvenience as it was only 1 more batch, and I was fine with that. However, yesterday was the last straw when I went out. She threw a party with 14 of her friends, and they got hungry, so they made their way down to the shop and went through nearly everything my team made. My dad owns the bakery, it's not too far down from our house, so it wasn't that hard for her to get in. When we came back we found my ex and 14 of her friends wasted on nearly $1,000 of pastries. I nearly lost my S, and started screaming at her, asking what the F she was doing, and why she thought this was okay. She blamed this on pregnancy cravings and tried to say that she wanted the baby to eat well, but when I asked about her friends, she said they also had cravings. I kicked her out and had to call and explain everything to both parties. Full refund for both of them as there was barely anything that could be salvaged. Update, she ended up calling me on her parents' phone around 7 to 8 a.m., screaming at me for posting our private lives for everyone to see. She then proceeded to ask me through crocodile tears if I would press charges on her and her friends for having fun. I replied yes, and as I was about to hang up, she brought up the child, to which I told her to get a paternity test or not it would not be my problem. She then starts trying to manipulate and gaslight me, crying, saying, it was just her being hospitable to her friends and that it was rude of me to yell at them and kick them out. She then proceeds to cry about me not caring about her, and I just hung up and blocked her. She tried to break in and vandalize my home while I was making the report, and she got herself brought to the station. The truth came out, or at least part of it. She was never pregnant. The test she took at the PD proved this, which led her to possible charges of miscarriage, to which she had to openly admit that she was never pregnant, and only trying to make sure I didn't leave. We had no problems before, so I don't even understand why she did this. Along with charges for the damage to my house, I will be pressing charges for the costs on her friends as well. As of right now she's sitting in jail waiting for the court date. What is the most petty thing you've done at work? In one of my first jobs, a colleague who was threatened by me was slowly putting ideas in the head of my boss until I get fired. He said I was straight out of college, inexperienced, incompetent, and that I just copied his work, which was so wrong. He was lazy as hell, so he would give a lot of his work to me. The day after I was fired, there was a meeting with the boss and an important client. I made the presentation and I was the one that was supposed to host the meeting. I worked my ass on this presentation to make a good impression. I knew the lazy bastard who had stabbed me in the back would take all the credit. One of the things that I did was synchronize the files on my personal computer to an internet cloud in order to have my files available at home. And I still had access to them at the time since it was only a day after. I knew that the bastard was too lazy, and would not thoroughly review the documents, so from the comfort of my home, I modified the presentation. Some information here and there, but nothing excessive. I just adjusted a few numbers so they were all incorrect. The icing on the cake is a hidden message after a photograph on the last panel that would only be visible during the presentation. Thank you for not paying attention to the erroneous data and not looking at the information that does not match in the least with what I exposed. I'm glad nobody will notice because they are not interested and will not ask any shit. Fuck off. It is such a loss that I wasn't there to witness this, but as far as I knew, the whole floor heard the screams of my boss. The guy got fired of course, and they didn't get the client. The most petty and satisfying thing I have done. My creepy stepsister inappropriately flirted with my perfect girlfriend during dinner with my parents and they didn't care because they let her act however she wants. My parents have been divorced ever since I was 14 and 4 years later, she married my stepdad. Along with my stepdad came his evil daughter who lacked a mother figure and became the worst version of herself. She's loud, rough, aggressive, takes up a lot of space with her presence, and thinks perfume is an acceptable substitute for a shower or deodorant. She has no manners whatsoever and my parents don't know how to manage her. My stepsister takes advantage of this and walks all over them. She's disrespectful and smokes inside the house, blares music, and has flown into random rages a couple times while gaming. My stepdad and mom are both very gentle, quiet people so they always try to keep the peace and don't ground her or anything. Luckily, she doesn't live with us and I will forever be glad about that because she's such a pain. She's easily the most insufferable person ever. My stepdad has said he feels guilty because he doesn't know where he went wrong in raising her. He thought just showing unconditional love and acceptance would be enough to inspire her to act like a normal woman. Boy was he wrong. For the last couple of months, I've been dating my girlfriend and she came over a few nights ago for dinner to meet my family. We had not planned on my stepsister being there but she came by unannounced for dinner once my girlfriend was already here. I was forced to introduce them and I wanted to tell my girlfriend to just leave before my stepsister did something horrible to her. But I was quiet and the entire dinner was just awkward. My stepsister had made several dirty jokes including ones to my girlfriend about wanting to eat her out, followed by winking at her. Mind you, my stepsister is 27 and my girlfriend is 19. My girlfriend looked so uncomfortable so I yelled that she was disgusting and she needed to apologize, but she just laughed and told me to take a joke. I looked to my parents for backup, but they could barely look me in the eye. My girlfriend whispers that it was okay, but it really wasn't and it only got worse as the dinner went on. She snuck glances at my girlfriend's butt whenever she got up. She openly talked about lesbianism and tried to figure out if my girlfriend had ever experimented. She also has a general need for control and will dominate conversation, so normal casual dinner chat was difficult. My parents basically pretended they didn't hear a lot of the gross stuff or they changed the topic, as they usually did. Later into the night, we were supposed to play a game or watch a movie with my parents, but my girlfriend insisted she had a lot of homework so she couldn't stay. I knew she was leaving because of my stepsister, we all knew it. When she was leaving my stepsister tried to hug her saying, "Come here honey buns," and she literally hid behind me. I was so embarrassed and pissed off. I told her to stop that, but she played innocent and said she was only trying to hug my girlfriend. I told her she was uncomfortable with her and she asked my girlfriend if that was true. She didn't respond and I just took that opportunity to walk her out. I apologized but she left really quickly. We haven't talked much since then and her text messages are really dry. She doesn't text me unless I text first. I feel so bad that she had to endure that harassment, but I'm even more pissed that my parents didn't do anything about it. I never want to bring her around my family again now. I apologized for my stepsister and I promised that she didn't have to see my family again if she was uncomfortable with them. She hadn't brought it up because she didn't want me to be offended or think she hated my family, but I honestly wouldn't blame her if she did. This was an issue that needed to be talked out anyway and she said she felt extremely self-conscious and grossed out. She also showed me that my stepsister found and followed her on Instagram the day after the dinner, and sent her a message saying hey there cutie. My girlfriend of course blocked her. Since my parents weren't going to do anything, I had the idea of writing an email to my stepsister laying out the things I'm not okay with. It said that she and our parents can have whatever relationship works for them, but I'm not going to tolerate certain things she does anymore. I mostly kept it focused on the predatory things and how uncomfortable my girlfriend felt. I said both of us knew exactly what she was doing even if we were pretending to ignore it. I directly told her it was predatory and my girlfriend left early just to get away from her. I said she should be ashamed to have sexually harassed someone. I also let her know my girlfriend wants nothing to do with her and if she shows up while my girlfriend is visiting, we will leave. I added that I personally am sick of her gross sexual commentary about girls in general. I told her from now on whenever she starts doing that while visiting us I'll be leaving the room. She just told me I could suck it followed by a bunch of middle finger emojis. Real mature. I burnt down a lot of houses when I was a child. As a young boy I often was left unsupervised and left to my own devices. It was a different time then, I often would travel all across town at the age of 5 on my bike. I still had training wheels on my bike when I started off all over town. My dad chained my bike to a tree once but I just walked instead. He grounded me, but I'd wake up early in the morning and just leave the house. I was out of control. I would go to the shipyard and crawl under the fence and climb the ladders, go out at the end of the wharf and climb underneath looking for crabs and starfish. One time I saw a lobster and tried to catch it and almost drowned. Looking back, I'm surprised I am still alive. I found this old abandoned building beside the shipyard all boarded up. There was a small hole for me to climb in, and so I went inside. It was dark, but there was enough natural daylight creeping through the windows to see. Upon looking around and investigating all of the cool stuff I found in there, I found 3 things worth noting. A pack of matches, a $5 bill, and a coffee cup that, believe it or not, I still have to this day, lol. Anyway, the building had a bunch of old paperwork packed in banker boxes. I lit a match and lit the place up just so I could watch. After the fire got out of control, I managed to escape unharmed. I walked across the street, bought as much 1-cent candy as I could get at the local convenience store, and went back and sat down on a railway tie and watched as the building burnt to the ground and the firefighters tried putting it out. No one ever questioned me. Since then, up until I was a teenager, I set a few buildings ablaze, not realizing the danger or the impact my actions caused. I've never been caught or suspected of doing it. After I reached my teens, I guess common sense kicked in and I stopped, lol. Has a young child ever come up to you alone and asked for help? I once was walking along the quiet streets where I would jog from time to time. I was out of breath from doing a sprint earlier, so I was walking rather slow. The next moment, a crying boy came out of a house, around 6 years of age, walking straight to me and grabbing my leg. Shocked, I asked what was wrong, but no answer. He was crying but not talking. 3 more unsuccessful attempts to get him to talk, when I saw a slightly older girl came out to pick up the younger boy, appearing to be her brother. Her eyes were red and teary, too. I decided to probe a little. Initially no answers, but then the girl finally spoke, saying that they were told not to speak to strangers. I eventually got enough information out of the girl to realize I need to intervene. Their mom was sleeping and they could not wake her, and their food was burning on the stove, having caught fire. I used to be an EMT for about 14 months about 10 years prior, but I was unsure of the correct way to take out the fire because I was not sure what kind of fire it was. Not seeing a fire extinguisher, I inspected the fire and saw no spattering oil or electrical dangers, so I just grabbed their pet blanket, drenched it water and smothered the burning casserole with it after switching off the stove. Once the, rather small, fire was neutralized, the girl led me to her mother, who was unresponsive on the floor. She was breathing, but not reacting to stimuli. I had some experience in looking for signs of things out of place, and saw no visible narcotics or alcohol, no obvious injuries, and called out the local ambulance service. The ambulance arrived and I learned that the mom was injecting insulin, so I assumed that she had passed out due to diabetic complications. She was stabilized and taken to hospital while I waited with the kids for their grandmother to arrive. The grandmother confirmed my beliefs. Good ending, no harm done, just one casserole dish that must have been impossible to clean, but I was in awe that I was there at that exact time that family needed help in an otherwise very quiet street on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Amazing how things sometimes just work out. Men, what secret do you keep from your girlfriend/wife? I was looking for a file on my girlfriend's laptop. She had left for the grocery store and I was waiting for her to get back so we could edit a video for an online first aid course I was taking. I was looking for the file and found a folder called Spicy hidden in her documents. You can imagine where my mind went. I opened it and started clicking. All of the files had names like 58264.spm, which I assumed was the name of the video, and the number was a counter of some kind. Brave, but risky move, hiding the name of the videos in a folder named after them. I started to watch one, very carefully, and I'll be honest, like 7 years ago careful. I mean, if my girlfriend was hiding spicy videos on her computer, I wanted to be sure they were spicy. They were. I really wanted to keep watching. I wanted to rub one out very bad. It took all of my willpower to force myself to close the file and remove my hand from my shorts. Then I rationalized, I had come this far, I may as well look at another to make sure it was actually spicy, and hey, maybe it'll help with the urge to rub one out. 49 more and I'm starting to think this file is worth it. I paused though. I could go down and leave it here. She'll never know. And if she caught me, I could say I was just moving it somewhere else. But it would be blatantly obvious why I did that. I was only down here to rub one out. No, wouldn't work. I have to log out and I'm doing it with a huge tent in my pants. I carefully log out and begin the process of moving her computer away from the wall and the power cord, so I can stand up and put my shorts back on. As I do this, the screen flickers. It was in the process of logging me out, but it hadn't done it yet. I'm looking at what I thought was an empty screen. I even started pulling my shorts up, and then I see it, blinking in small at the top of the screen. Thursday, 6 to 7 p.m. We need to talk. Thursday, 6 to 7 p.m. We need to talk. I stopped, shorts around my ankles, stunned. My mind raced. I didn't know what to do. I hadn't touched her computer and the file had been opened/saved recently. The file name even matched the counter in the folder name. What could it be? A sexting exchange? Had I opened it, I would have seen a different reality. The reality was that those were the cooking videos she used when she wanted to make spicy food and couldn't have fire nearby. In that moment when my mind was racing and I was about to go totally apeshit, I should have figured that poop out. Instead, I pulled my shorts up and put the computer back, sat down somewhere else and played it stupid. When she got home, I acted like nothing was wrong. She seemed fine and perplexed when I treated the topic like it was serious. We talked about how difficult it was to cook with nobody else home, and it was just never brought up again. I should have done better. I should have just lied about it being spicy, I know. But I couldn't tell a lie like that, Now I have the awkwardness of knowing that someday she'll ask me why I acted like she had a sexting buddy. What was your high school's biggest scandal? After the expansion of the parking lot, the high school hiked the cost of parking spaces, then cut the amount of spaces available to students. It was literally the opposite of what they said they would do: expand the lot to add more student capacity, then drop the per space price. The price hike wasn't small either. It went from, if I remember correctly, $30 to $45 a semester, to well over $100. The student body was so angry that the student government went from decorating the halls to actually pushing back on the administration like a legitimate political body. They filed formal grievances which were completely ignored, then made objections in official meetings with the administration which were dismissed. Then they stopped cooperating with the administration until their grievances were addressed. Meaning that when the school told them to do the work for pep rallies and dances, they got told to get lost. The administration then revoked the staff involvement with the student government and told them that the club was now over. They basically shut down the student government, defunded it, refused to support it, and ignored the student government's constitution. Then, the student government decided that it was still a viable political entity, government in exile almost, and organized a mass protest during school hours, which was actually pretty tame. During the break between classes, everyone would go to the gym and show their support for addressing the parking lot issue. The class before this protest was to take place, the principal announced on the PA system and said that the gymnasium was closed, and if anyone was either in the gymnasium or not in their class for the next class they would be arrested. I went down to the gym to check it out. There were hundreds of students who still wanted to go and quietly crowded around the gym's doors, but the doors were barricaded by administrators with crossed arms, and the school resource officer and a backup officer, both in full battle rattle with pepper spray, cuffs, gun, and everything else you'd see a cop with on patrol. We later found out that administrators had pulled members of the student government out of class during this time, and several of them were threatened with immediate expulsion. The student government and body blinked. Everyone went to class on time and the issue basically died. At next month's pep rally, we were informed that a new student government had been appointed and we were introduced to them. The head of the government said something about fighting the parking fees, but the message that the student body had gotten from the administration was clear: step out of line, and we'll push you into the school-to-prison pipeline. The purpose of the student government was to show how the democratic process works. What we got was a display of actual tyranny. An unpopular decision that affected the student body, and caused the student government to respond, was met with open refusals, threats, the elimination of a legitimately elected government to be replaced by a puppet government sponsored by moneyed interests.
I realize the man I'm currently with is cheating on his fiancée. I'm currently lying next to a sleeping man in my hotel room, a surgeon I met a few weeks ago, and I just figured out that he's engaged. Getting married in 2 weeks. And didn't tell me. No mention of a fiancé at all. In fact, he told me a few hours ago that he was going to visit family on the East Coast in 2 weeks, no mention of a wedding in Cancun in 13 days. He has been using a fake name with me. I had suspected this for a while, but I saw his real name on his Tesla screen while we drove to dinner earlier in the evening. It's an unusual name, similar to the one he gave me, so it wasn't hard to find him online. I searched his real name while in the bathroom about an hour ago, while he was asleep, and besides finding his LinkedIn and other social media, I found his wedding registry and wedding page. Should I tell his fiancée? I found her on Instagram and LinkedIn. To complicate things, we live about 2 hours away and I offered to visit him one day this weekend and said I would meet with clients in the area to make it a work trip, to justify the cost of a hotel etc. He offered to pay for the hotel and initially I said it wasn't necessary, as I make good money during my business trips, but frankly, I've had some cancellations this weekend and won't make enough to cover the 2 days at this relatively nice hotel. He spent over $100 on dinner for us, but I kinda want to take him up on him paying for part of the hotel, just the one night he was here. Is that bad to do if I'm considering telling his fiancée later, after we part ways? I feel sick to my stomach about the whole thing. Have been up all night, unable to sleep. My plan is, pretend like nothing is wrong until we check out together. He made it clear he wants to check out of the hotel with me, most likely so he can pay. Text him after we've left and tell him what I know. Message his fiancée on Instagram from a throwaway account, send screenshots of his field profile, and of course never see him again. Does this make sense? I don't want to confront him in person because I don't know what he's capable of.
What is your most shameful climax? Super horny 13-year-old in the early 90s, I didn't have a phone so had no access to corn. We lived in a 2-story house and the neighbor behind us was in a 1-story house. Single mother with 2 kids, boy and girl. The boy and I became friends and I met his mom a couple times. What they didn't know was that I kept spying on them. They had no blinds or curtains in the kitchen, dining room and bathroom. The bathroom windows were frosted, but you could make out shapes. And it was obvious when mom was in there because of her height and figure. So, seeing the bathroom light come on and seeing her figure disrobe was an instant hard-on for a 13-year-old. One Saturday night I go to my room, I lay down and spy on the house. My buddy said that he and his sister were going to their dad's for the weekend so their mom will be alone. In my horny mind, I thought this would be a weekend of her walking around naked. So far disappointed. I spy in the dim dining room some action. I watch what I think is some aggressive effing in the dining room. I start beating my shit. I think it is about time the neighbor mom gets some action, and about time that I can watch it. Keep in mind that I have not yet actually seen corn, and not actually seen anyone have intimacy. So, it should be of no surprise to learn that what I had seen wasn't the MILF getting plowed on her dining room table but a house plant being blown around by a fan. Her kids went away because it was warm and her AC went out, so they turned on fans in the house. 2 had jacked off and climaxed to a house plant.
Bullies. What happened when the person you were bullying finally snapped? When I had been bullied constantly in 7th grade by 3 different kids/groups of kids and the school showed so little interest in helping me. I was physically bullied, verbally mocked, humiliated in front of the other kids, and not an eye was batted. When I finally took my mom's advice to make a scene the next time someone started throwing things at me, I did it. We were outside that day for PE and while we were all sitting in lines at the start of class a kid in the line next to me started throwing pebbles at me. I ignored it for a moment, then when he kept going I yelled at him to stop. I didn't care that people were staring, I wanted them to. I wanted them to see that this average height, able-bodied boy was throwing things at me, a very small and disabled girl. The teacher came over and asked what happened. Kid told him they were only pebbles, he wasn't hurting me. The teacher agreed with him and told me if I ever disrupted his class like that again I was getting detention. I don't know what it is about some teachers but the second they get put in charge of more than one child they become absolutely blind to any kind of bullying, and if it gets pointed out to them, they think that particular incident exists in a vacuum and couldn't possibly be a sign of anything worse. I was 11 years old and suicidal because I felt so incredibly powerless. That teacher only solidified that feeling. So the next day I decided that I would contact their parents, with my mom. To my surprise they didn't care either. It had got to such a serious point that, one day I brought my hunting pocket knife. I decided that if anyone did anything that I would unalive them. So, the same boy that was bothering me before in PE, tried to come at me again, but without a moment's notice, I stabbed him, straight in the eye.
What is the most unreasonable request a parent has asked of you as a classroom teacher? Please give my daughter an assignment that will allow her to pass your class and graduate. We have a busy summer planned and she will be unavailable to attend summer school. This was written in response to an email that I sent to a student's mother. For the purpose of this answer, I will call the student Bella. I had tried several times to contact Bella's mother over the school year. She had never replied to any of my emails, unlike her science teacher, who had similar difficulties, yet communicated with her regularly. Unfortunately, it took sending Bella's mother an email explaining that her daughter was about to fail my class and not graduate, to get her to pay attention. By that time, it was already too late. Bella had attended my class 36 out of 180 days of the school year, hated history, and was usually at least 5 minutes late whenever she did show up. In class, she was disrespectful, disruptive, and never bothered to lift a finger to do any work. Once I asked her why she was absent, and she shrugged her shoulders and turned her head away from me. Her attendance in other classes was similarly poor, but not as poor as mine, which was her final class of the day. Unfortunately for Bella, I was not a pushover when it came to her grade. However, I acquiesced with her mother's wish that I give her work to take home in order to pass the class. I create workbooks for my class, which correspond to different units. This helps me not only differentiate between different abilities, but it offers flexibility for students in case they get sick, and makes it easier for substitutes to follow whenever I am absent. There are 18 units in my class during the school year, and she has yet to complete one. I decided that in order for Bella to pass, she would need to complete 1/3 of the units, which meant that she would need to do 6 of the already available workbooks. I allowed her to choose which ones she wanted to do, and sent her off with the agreement that they would be completed over the weekend, but privately, I expected her to work on them over the week. As anticipated, Bella didn't show up until the final day of class. Along with the workbooks was a handwritten note from her mother explaining that Bella didn't complete everything because she was busy and that she had tried her best. When I checked the workbooks, I found that she didn't bother to try. She had completed 2 of the easier assignments, both of which were located in only one workbook. That summer, I ended up teaching a credit recovery class for history. As suggested, Bella was in attendance. However, unlike the regular school year, most of the curriculum was online, and if you failed to log in more than 2 days in a row, you were locked out and withdrawn from the course. It took less than a week for Bella to be withdrawn from the class. To my knowledge, she never stepped foot in my school again, or recovered the history credits that she needed to graduate. I am assuming that she was failing some of her other classes, and decided to drop out as a consequence. Poor Bella. As easy as it is to blame her for what had happened, it's very clear that her mother should at the very least receive part of the blame for enabling her behavior.